Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the LCK Spring 2021 playoffs. This is, of course, round one. We've already had Harmalife Esports be successful. We won't talk about how they were successful. However, they were the team to come out ahead against Nongshim Red Force. And now we have T1 versus DRX. Two of the teams that locked playoffs very early on. This should theoretically be a closer series. But you know what, Chronicler? I highly doubt it.
I want to have faith. No one had faith in DRX coming into the split, right? And I think justifiably so. This was a team that kind of crumbled apart. A lot of people regarded Pioshik as the weaker part of that original lineup that we, of course, saw go to Worlds. And then they got to here. The problem is they have been slumping, and when you choose your slump, if you could, end of the split is probably the worst.
Yes, that's exactly right. They're slumping to the point where they, lost their final match against Live Sandbox. It was a messy series. But let's have a look at the road that they had to get here. Let's have a look at the standings as they were at the end of the split. As you can see, DRX fell to 5th place. This was a team that was flirting with 3rd and 2nd in the first round robin, and then plummeted all the way down. You can see that T1 and DRX are relatively close when it comes to where they are in the standings. If you look at the win rates for these teams, T1 is over 60%, and DRX are under 50% win rate throughout the split.
And it's a really rough one, and what made DRX so good at the beginning of the split was kind of lost, and this is the opposite of what a team like Nongshim did, where their initial form was rough, but then they kind of honed it and got into a better team slowly, something that we saw teams like Live Sandbox and Africa get close to, but not actually make it.
Yeah.
But with DRX, it feels like the magic is kind of gone, and then without the magic, the way that this team won earlier in the split was by miracle wins, and those are not happening anymore.
No, and also, it's the hardest way to forge a team, right? You don't forge a team away from, by stealing victories.
No.
When you're not supposed to get them. You forge a good team by playing consistent, solid League of Legends and finding the early leads and dictating that based on your draft and then playing to win conditions. It's not how DRX managed to find success.
Oh no.
And it's bit them later in the this season. But now we're in playoffs and they have an opportunity to upset. And if there's a team that's going to be a dark horse, it is going to be DRX. And speaking of horses, Pioshik's coming off a pentakill in a series he lost on a horse. Is there more dark horse than that? I don't think so.
Even, especially considering it's Hecarim, because Lilia is, she's a deer, she's nice.
That would be dark deer, right?
Well, yeah, but it still feels the same niche. Whereas, if we look at what Pioshik has done for this team in the early half of the split, he was the one who took them on the back.
Yeah.
But it hasn't looked as convincing later on.
No, it hasn't really been able to do it. Let's have a look at some predictions, though. As, look, I'm predicting myself, predicting the predictions. I know, it's a little bit of Inception.
That's fine.
I'm expecting a fair bit of red here. Let's see if we do have any hipsters, though. We may. As, okay, no, it's looking pretty red now.
No, still no.
I knew these four. And, yeah. This was understandable. We still do have the fan predictions, and we'll see if there are any at home that did have 10.5% with some faith in DRX. And so that's definitely good news for people that were expecting maybe this would be 100%, because to be perfectly honest, this is a very easy best of 5 to predict. However, probability and possibility are very different things, Chronicler. And so we may just have a miracle on our hands if DRX can find that magic that they unfortunately lost. Let's have a look at the points of the match here as we get into this best of 5, our second of the playoffs. T1 looking so dominant after their victory over Harmalife Esports. It was not close at all. This is a team that has experimented a lot, but it seems like when push comes to shove, they throw in all of their veterans and probably one of the best young players to debut over the last couple of years in Carrier. And you get to an 88.9% win rate over 9 games, which I'm just going to go out on a limb and say ain't bad.
I mean, I don't know if I'd call it ain't bad, okay? It's pretty good. Jokes aside, the problem that T1 was facing in the middle and the beginning of the split was that they looked very strong in terms of laning, but then the actual winning was a big problem. Whereas the second half of the split, the laning is still there, but now the winning is also there, and it's the amount of pressure that these players are able to generate while simultaneously finding kills in lanes where you're not supposed to. This is a Tom Kench Senna bot lane. You're not allowed to get double kills, and there's a reason why Keria kept getting play of the games on Kench of all characters.
Twice throughout the season. Of course, he was one of the first to debut it as well, or re-debut, I guess, because of course, if you with long memories at home, you remember the days of way too much Tahm Kench. But this bottom lane has just been exceptional. I think, you know, King of Spring is absolutely the title that Teddy deserves. He is so good at just getting out to early leads when the year starts. But let's go over to the other side of the Rift. DRX is a very different story, but I think our eyes should be glued to the top side of the map, whereas on T1 side, it's the bottom side that has been so consistent.
And for DRX, it's about a return to form. You see here, it's so clear, right? We can tell you, DRX, they looked good, now they didn't, but nothing tells you that, like the win-loss that we see here, 6-3 in initial round, they wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for that incredibly dominant initial plays.
And this guy right here.
Yeah, and you gotta love him. Regardless of whether you think that it's going to be a solid performance here from DRX, whether they can actually regain their form and get back to the team that we all really loved seeing, even though you and I had very different opinions on how good they actually were. And it is this player in the jungle. He is way better than we had expected, but he's also a player who I feel has become more flippy as the split has progressed. And that's a problem because he needs to be dependable for Kingen to perform. And if Kingen and Pyoshi don't perform, then the rest of the team falls further and further behind. And while I think Solka, Bao and Becca, compared to their experience, are playing really well, it's not enough.
No, I agree. And, you know, back when Solka was quad, I think when we were watching DRX last year, there were a lot of people, myself included, that were like, well, I actually think that he's one of the better solo laners out of the two that were already on the team, right? You're never going to replace Chovy. However, Doran wasn't necessarily looking up to scratch. And Solka has performed, but I just don't know whether he's going to be able to perform here today in comparison to the greatest League of Legends player of all time. It is just, it's a very difficult ask.
That's a tall order for anyone,
yes.
Atlas. And you see here, we talked about T1, yes, they're dominant, but in the first half, they had stats that were fairly similar, but then they didn't win. Now they still have these stats, and they do win. And that's a big problem for any team facing them. And whereas a team like Damwon Kia has excelled, not even necessarily purely in the laning phase, but their conversion, their macro, their objective game, and their team fighting that's just on another level, T1 just feels like a powerhouse team right from the beginning. And as DRX, you need time, you need space, because in the first round, some of the wins happened in that weird 25 to 35 minute mark where, you know, everything can happen. And where there was chaos, and T1 is not showing any chaos anymore.
No, absolutely not. This is a return to an old T1 that was a slow-moving juggernaut towards victory, or towards your Nexus, as it were. Let's go down the roster, though. This is, of course, their most winningest over the largest sample size roster that they have throughout this season. Kanakuz, Faker, Teddy, and Keria. Keria has just been so good as well. I want to reiterate it. I know we saw all of his plays just layered on top of one another. I think Teddy's been playing exceptionally well, but whether it's Gumayusi or Teddy down there towards the bottom side of the map, Keria is just so incredibly good. We saw it last year, and it's continued here in this one. DRX, this squad right here has a difficult task on their hands.
They need to refine their old form, where yes, the early game wasn't amazing, but Kingen and Pyoshi still could find leads, could get Kingen on something like a Jace ahead, and then Solka, Bao and Becca were also strong enough that they could weather the storm, that they could weather the attention the enemy jungle will be paying to them, and then get into a mid-game on a relatively even footing. And then they banded together and snatched Winch out of the jaw of defeat so many times. But it really depends on whether or not they get back to that form. In the last couple of games, it just hasn't been the case.
It hasn't. This is going to be our key player matchup, and I think that this one is one of the closest for DRX, to be perfectly honest. I think Kingen has been an absolute breath of fresh air. If you cast your mind back to when Kingen started playing, it was on KT, where he was stepping in instead of Smeb, who was slumping at that point in time. And I think a lot of people were like, oh, but how can you sub Smeb out? He was so good. And Kingen sort of missed out on that exciting debut, right? Because he was stepping in for a fan favorite. now he's really come into his own here on this DRX roster and has looked very, very good. I think his Gnar play and his Gnar counterplay has been one of the highlights, but he's got a tough ask to go up against T1, not necessarily just in the lane, but in how T1 play the game.
And Kana is a player who has had kind of a renaissance this game, because in the early weeks of spring, he looked really rough. There were a lot of individual mistakes. He seemed a little bit more tilt prone, where even if the lane went poorly, old Kana, you were like, it's fine. He'll find team fights, he'll find angles, but jumping in on Gnar when the opportunity wasn't there, but he took the time off. Zeus tried his best to, you know, weather the storm to keep the rest of the team alive, but had a lot of difficulty as well. And now Kana, he's grinded solo queue, he's looking a lot stronger, and that's a problem, because as you said, I think it's going to be up to Kingen and Pyosik, and DRX, they weren't a team. We have many of these teams in the LCK where you're like, if top jungle doesn't win, it's going to be a rough one. And those teams didn't make it to playoffs.
No, they certainly didn't. I think you're referring to Afrika and Sandbox, who are definitely one of our biggest defenders of that one. But DRX were, I think, the blueprint that they were looking at when they were designing their game plan. They're like, DRX are winning. They're playing purely through their top side. Sometimes they don't even play through their top side. They just play through Pyosik. And he's the one that has to demand all of the pressure, create all of that early chaos. And if he hasn't had his breakfast this morning, things could be very, very difficult here for DRX. As we do get into the draft for our second playoffs match, Sylas will be banned away first. Solka not going to be playing that one in the mid lane, nor will it be flexed anywhere else around the map. Sylas, as we saw Chovy utilize him yesterday, is pretty busted here on this patch.
Senna Seraphine bans, I am sure, here from DRX. We do not give Fake a Seraphine. In general, we don't give a Seraphine to anyone, but particularly to Fake, it's just no. We don't want to see that. And Teddy's Senna has been insane. And ironically enough, I don't even think it's just Teddy Senna. I think it also means that you'll be facing carry as Tom Kench. And I can't believe I'm forced to say this, but his Kench is so good. Like his devours and even his aggressive play with a character that many had kind of deemed just a devour bot is insane. And with the Tristana ban, we still have a lot of the top tier junglers available. We saw yesterday that Hecarim hasn't really dropped in priority yet, even with the nerfs to 11.6. I'm also looking at a possible Volibear angle, and of course, if there's a king of Udyr, it is Pyosik.
Yeah, this is the thing that's really interesting, is where the priority is going to be in that jungle. With the slight nerf that Hecarim has had, I still think that he is king of the jungle. As Renekton going to be banned away. Now DRX, they're forced into a difficult choice, right? Do they ban nothing away and leave up Thresh and the Hecarim? And the answer is they're going to ban the Thresh. And so T1 can go towards that horse if they want to, but it does mean that Pyosik gets to pick up his Udyr if he wants it, and we've seen Udyr's win in this matchup, even if it's not the majority of the time.
And again, it is Pyosik, and that's why we keep going back to what form will DRX be on today. Now, Kaz has played a very serviceable Udyr.
Interesting.
I don't mind this, and I feel like even though, in my opinion, the Hecarim is a stronger pick at the moment still, in a vacuum, taking away the Udyr from Pyosik does make sense. And as you pointed out, one of Hecarim's weaknesses that we haven't seen exposed as much is his early game. If you invade him early, if you can get a lead there and try to deny him farm with priority lanes, which T1 indubitably will be having with how strong they've been playing, then it becomes a lot harder for Pyosik to kind of hit the breakpoints that you need on the horse.
Well, Pyosik is going to do it. And we'll see what they are going to line it up with. If you're going down the tier list and things like that, there's not as many things that are glaringly open at this point in time with the red side bans. We actually don't see this a whole lot. Like the must-ban champions, there was a time where red side had to literally ban the same 3 champions every single time. It feels like the power level of these picks is certainly high, but it hasn't really been happening as, there's the Zoe pick away against Faker, but also a big one for Solka.
And that's really interesting, because yes, Faker had a breakout performance, as he does with his every season. I mean, he's been in here for so long, and he's the best League of Legends player of all time, so he'll have a couple of performances like that. But what's interesting is that a blind Zoe seems like something that T1 can definitely punish. This is a different approach, though, which T1 has been favoring, saying that
Is it just
we know
Oriana?
We know, yeah, exactly. We know Gnar has been nerfed. We know it's a pick that is under a lot of scrutiny, but Kana has shown that he has the level of control on Gnar that some like Kingen also had. And important to note, Kingen's Gnar in of itself is also a threat that T1 might not want to deal with, because yes, you can deal with the Gnar, but it does require a lot of jungle attention, and I don't think T1 wants to focus, or let Cuz rather focus on top side. This would be very comfortable here for T1, but it does mean that in the early game I expect Solskjaer to actually have a little bit of pressure on Faker.
Faker has been playing the Victor very effectively though recently. This was what they just obliterated Humble Life Esports on, and it was with one of these very strange drafts. It was still back on 11.5, but Jace is going to be picked up here, obviously. And this
throwback.
This is actually fantastic though, because this not only destroys Gnar in lane, but sets DRX up for a pretty decent poke composition.
And the poke composition was back early in the split, where I went from DRX as just a team that wins games that they shouldn't. They're actually a good team. This was their execution, the way they played around Division, the way that they were able to consistently leverage the most value, was really cool to see from a team where the expectations generally were very low. No one expected this DRX to do this well. Everyone expected them to be, you know, maybe bottom 4, maybe vie for a potential playoff spot, and even though they have dropped off, I think it's important to note that this is DRX going back to when they looked most comfortable, when they did look strong, when it wasn't just them just grabbing away victories, but actually finding the poke composition, finding the early leads, and then playing it out beautifully.
Well, the Kalista is going to be banned away after the Varus that was aimed a little bit at Teddy there. Interesting. Feels like more of a deft ban these days, but maybe a little bit of a hint as to what Teddy has been playing in scrims.
Is there the Kai'Sa is still open, and the interesting thing about Kai'Sa, of course, is that you can look at things like the Aphelios, the Jinx that have been very popular, but with Thresh being banned away, it's not as strong as it always was. I think a Kai'Sa pickup for DRX, it would be very in theme with what they've been doing so far.
I love this so much more.
Okay.
Oh my goodness, DRX! This is spicy. This is a big level up in their drafting, actually. I think that in their series versus Sandbox, it felt pretty lackluster. And yes, the series didn't mean very much at all, right? They were already confirmed in playoffs. They were already confirmed that 5th place. And the Ezreal, I think, just fits the theme of this composition very, very well. Kai'Sa Leona come out as predictably as ever. And this is some stock standard drafting out of T1 right now, but is looking a little outdated.
I agree. I think that both comps are actually fairly cohesive. The T1 comp obviously has a bit more onus on them to actually do something, because if you get into a mid to late game scenario, DRX has a slight lead or they're relatively even, then the poke coming out from DRX combined with the Braum, which I also love because that counter engage is so useful with the poke that you already have from DRX is really nice. The one issue is that DRX have had issues with actually staying even in lane. I'm not even talking about ahead. I think that this composition, even if you're relatively even, can still do so much work due to the amount of this is disgusting in terms of poke, right? You have 3 insane poke champions. Even just an Ezreal and 2 items later on will get you there.
Not to mention the fact that Braum is probably one of the greatest supports to augment a poke composition at the same time. Like, you fish for your Winter's Bite, you land that passive, and then you can pull the trigger. But non-committal CC is exactly what you need.
And it's also hard to engage into the Braum, and this is a key thing for DRX. The only downside of this is that the Hecarim feels a little bit out of place because he wants to go in, the rest of his team not necessarily, but he will have prio lanes, presumably here with the Jace and the Zoe in mid, at least initially. That means he can farm up to the point where he's strong, and then Pioche just needs to play a little bit more respectful. The one downside, and the one big caveat, and it is a big one, Atlas, is that if T1 get ahead, and they choke out vision, they find flanks and engages. Once they get on top of you, game is over.
I actually love it, because a poke composition, based on the archetype, has always been basically a coin flip.
Yeah.
Because if you don't manage to get all of that control, if you don't get to that point where you can utilize it, poke comps look real silly really fast. But what is DRX as a team, if not a coin flipper? So I think it's absolutely perfect as we hop onto the ref for T1 versus DRX. Game number 1 of this best of 5. T1 with a very standard draft, looking like they haven't needed to make any sort of changes whatsoever. And let's see whether it's actually going to work out here in game number 1, because we were having a chat backstage, and we predicted that this was going to be the plan for T1. That is, just pick all of our standard champions, don't give anything away, just play comfort. And then if you're pressured, if you're forced to make any adjustments, that's when you do it. And we already know, we saw it in the Harmwell Life Esports series, they have so much left in the back of the tank, and it's things like the Volley Bear. It is definitely, you know, the current OP picks and things like that.
I agree. It's a very conservative draft from T1. The good thing is, if you get a smash win here as T1 with this conservative draft, what we see often in these best of threes is that then as the game, or like as the series progresses, it gets more and more stumpy. Damwon Key is a really good example of this, where they might have difficulty with you in the first game, but then the second game, not as much, and the third game is a complete blowout. And that is a pattern that historically T1 has also followed. And if you don't have to give anything away, if you can keep your crazy carrier counter picks hidden, you're going to be super happy.
Yeah.
Like, as you say, nothing is given away from this. It's a super standard team composition. You're playing for prior lanes. You have some scaling aspects with the Kai'Sa and the Victor. And as a whole, you can play a lot of different ways, where at DRX, one way to play this comp, and you need to do it well.
Well, let's see whether they can. As into the laning phase already, you expect that Kingen is going to have the shove, and indeed he does. Both of our junglers just farming things out. Both of them starting on the bottom side of the map. I think this is intelligent for both sides, because getting that matchup to a good point is important, as Bao's going to get engaged on there just a little bit. Good stun comes out, and you can see the counter-engage potential from this Braum. You know, he just taps the Leona as she comes in, and then you can actually trade relatively well.
You're playing Braum into engage reports is a very good feeling. You're very happy about that.
This was also when T1 won the level 2 race as well. Just shows just how strong Braum is level 1.
It's just the sheer force of not only the damage, but the CC allowing Bao to weave in a couple of extra autos. They still need to be respectful though, because earlier in the split I would have felt comfortable saying that Teddy was the teamfight AD carry and Gumayusi was the laning AD carry for T1, where Gumayusi would always find 20, 30 CS leads, and then compared to Teddy, his impact later would be less. However, this current version of T1 is they just win basically all the time, which is a bit of a problem.
Yes. It's a problem for their opposition.
Yeah.
It's not really a problem for them. I'm sure they're pretty happy with it. As Cuz's stats are pretty good outside of him getting into his enemy's jungle.
And I...
continuing that one. As
I looked into that, and when you looked at the picks that he played in round 2, it was mostly either champions that want to power farm, so he just power farmed his own jungle, or gankers, right? Things like the Volley Bear, where you're not really... You're more expected to set up the rest of your lanes than to actually go in. I think the champion like the Nidalee that he also played could have gone in deeper, but as a whole, Cuz has been just super diligent about doing what his teams need him to do. Whether that is set up vision, play around his lanes, find objectives, and consistently get the smites, which is also something that we've seen some mess-ups every now and then here in the LCK.
Yeah, smites are difficult, you know. It's not even just in the LCK. I just find that smites they've become more and more difficult to get working from what I've seen.
Honestly, if I'm a jungler and I'm playing in a meta where Jinx has no cap on her R and Cho'Gath is on the fringes, like all those things just make you very unhappy.
Yeah, no, it isn't helpful. It certainly isn't helpful.
Not great.
I do want to go into sort of the success of this particular... Oh, okay. This is a good matchup for the Ezreal, as it turns out. But I want to talk about this iteration of T1, because you were talking about, you know, Gumayusi and the differences between Teddy and him. I think it's actually a little bit larger than that, and I think it comes down to what veteran status brings a team, and especially as of what we've seen for T1. And that is discipline, right? And I think that Cuz has come in, and your point about, you know, him being diligent, him just, you know, playing to the win conditions of his team, just shows that he is so much more disciplined now than he used to be. Cuz used to be an extraordinarily flippy jungler. Like, I don't know whether it's just a thing with DRX junglers, but, you know, Cuz dating all the way back to when he was on Longzhu, he's always been that kind of guy. He's dominant in solo queue, but has a bit of that mentality. We haven't seen that this season.
And we have seen it with Owner, and I think that's why I'm happy to see Cuz back, because even though Owner had some really highlight plays, as a whole you can still see the inexperience and the lack of discipline jumping in when you shouldn't. And as you said, Cuz has been super well about that if they go in.
Oh, Teddy avoids the Winter's Bite. Could actually be a big deal here as the stun comes down onto Carrier, but he's happy to soak it. Good sidestep on the E as well. But you can see Bao still playing aggressively. Cuz coming in for a bit of a love tap there onto Pyosik. We'll just get booped and not too much more will happen. Slight advantage for DRX in the lanes, I think largely owing to the solo lanes laning very well so far. Doesn't mean too much for where this game is at, and despite getting a little bit of antsiness in these lanes, not really too much to write home about as it all stands.
It's a classic first game in the best of 5. Both teams are kind of feeling what is the form, what are we looking at, how are our opponents looking. And as expected, there are sizable leads coming out. As yet again, Carrier and Teddy, they just keep trading in this 2v2.
Yep, Carrier just loves pressing that E button. And it's a decent time to do it as well. You already saw Cuz getting that deep vision in, I believe. Not sure whether Hecarim's standing on it right now, but he was certainly spending some time in his opponent's jungle. That is going to buy a bit of a reset here for Teddy and Carrier on the bottom side.
And that creates a possible tempo lead where Teddy and Carrier will be back in the lane, might find a shove. Cuz can clear his bot side jungle, and then they could look towards a first Drake, because as T1, interestingly enough, I think that when it comes to a straight up 5v5, you actually do have an edge if you're first at the objective. If DRX can set up shop and clear out some vision and just start throwing poke at you, it's never going to be fun. But their level 6 power spikes are still really strong. Leona, if she can go in, follow up by Teddy, Cuz slapping someone down, or a big ultimate by Kana, all those things will allow you to basically deal with DRX before they become a problem, before they hit that first spike, and they really start chunking those health bars.
Looking forward to seeing how it's going to work, as Kingan's going to go for his reset as well. 30 seconds until Shelly does spawn on this map. I think Herald's actually going to be very important for either side as well, especially looking at this top lane. I imagine that Pyosik is going to have his eye on that area of the map, because if Kingan gets a ridiculous lead in this matchup, things can get very, very rough. And T1, as you said, back in the lane now. We'll see what this actually means. We'll see where the focus is going to be, whether it will be, as T1 does like to do, a little bit more aimed around the Herald, trying to get that first turret and trying to get a tempo advantage that way, or whether, as you say, the Dragon is going to be what's on the menu.
And you can sense the tension in this 2v2 as Carrier is about to hit level 6. Teddy has already hit it, because if you get Teddy ahead in this matchup, historically, as we saw, this split in the LCK, the Ezreal has been the big winner in the matchup. But if you go way back, Kai'Sa was actually considered one of the stronger picks into the Ezreal, because in a vacuum, like in a 1v1, you always just win, right? Like you hit your Void Seeker, you go in, you blow him up, and there's not that much you can do about it.
Yeah. Ooh, Faker taking a lot of damage here as Solka lights him on fire. Kana now grouped up with Cuz. Cuz always seems to be in the right position to defend when Pyosik's spending time up here. This goes back to what we were saying. Cuz like mitigating the pressure this time around. As now possibly waiting for Solka. Stun going to come in. Pyosik going to answer though. Devastating charge pushes him back, but yeah, Cuz is he's Udyr, so not going to be threatened too much.
Throwing out the Smiter, making sure you have the chilling smite for the possibly upcoming fight. Cryo is gained by Bao and Baka. They're already set up, but they need to be respectful. Again, DRX are the ones that need to play it slow, that need to avoid and engage.
Yeah, this is aggressive. Carrier has the Eclipse, though. He's soaking so much damage as Teddy gets exhausted in the end. Cuz going to get that smite off for the extra heal. Does have flash, so he's not going to die. However, does still have to get out of the pit. As you can see, Kana still on the top side. No teleport. And that is going to mean that this Cloud Drake does go over to DRX.
And initially, you might look at it and say, DRX, they go in so aggressively, but it is with the knowledge that they have the teleport advantage available, meaning that even in a worst-case scenario, you're fighting 5v4, and that is all you'll take any time of the day. The initial Drake here goes over to DRX, and thank you for that, Atlas. There will be no Cloud Soul this game.
Yeah, I know. Look, I needed to get better. I got it all out of my system during the regular season.
Exactly.
And look, I was watching all of yesterday's games. Not a lot of Cloud Souls were there, but I was still in the chat, and often that meant that the curse just
that was
continued.
enough. Yeah. It's a powerful kills indeed, and that means that for DRX, getting early Drake leads is really, really nice, because an Infernal Drake with a poke comp like this is devastating. However, The question of whether or not that play was actually worth it remains to be seen, because T1 got a couple of plays. Kana is a little bit less behind in this matchup now, and the Rift Herald will go to T1.
Yeah.
And you pointed out why it's so important. You want to get down those towers as DRX, you want to get a gold lead on your carries. Not able to do that if T1 are actually able to scale up evenly. The margin that you have becomes so much thinner in the mid game.
This also goes back to what we were talking about poke compositions and how they function as well. Like, the more control of the map that you have, the more darkness there is, the more difficult it is for DRX to actually play to the win conditions of a poke composition. That's why poke comps have historically been so hit or miss. You know, whether or not, you know, it's now or whether it was 2 years ago, you know, these things do not change. And sometimes you get those leads, those advantages, and sometimes you don't. But the thing with T1, especially this iteration of T1, they generally get those advantages and they hold on to them. So it's going to be very difficult for DRX to fight this uphill battle. That being said, it's not uphill yet, and these lanes that we knew were going to be strong are continuing to be. So I think Solk are even overperforming in this matchup right now, as Kana looking to dive on forward. Loses out on that trade as it turns out. The burst just a little bit too powerful, as that empowered shock blast does not connect, or the accelerated one, depending on whether you want to get it right or not.
I forgive you.
Thank you.
It's fine. We all make mistakes. Some of us more than others. Me.
Yes,
But,
I mean,
you know.
there's no need to insinuate.
I know, I was talking about myself.
Oh,
I
right.
wouldn't dare talk about you that way. That would be... It's my first playoffs and I'm already trash-talking my co-worker. That would be terrible.
Now I know that I've worked with Papa for way too long, because that would have definitely been aimed at me if it had been that situation. Papa, if you're watching, I love you and miss you. As T1 just going to get to work clearing out this bottom side of the map. True Shot Barrage going to come through just for some poke here for DRX. And Bauernbecker still putting on some pressure, but no plates have actually been gathered. And it does feel a little bit like T1 are just chilling. Faker going to avoid the bubble and is able to put on a lot of damage here. Had flash, didn't quite have the kill threat, but this is scary because Faker starting to look more and more online, and now he's gifted Shelly into this mid lane. I think this is so cool because they had an opportunity to shove it towards topside, but instead, oh no, Faker's not actually going to get any gold. So never mind, that's just going to be all over to Cuz, I believe.
Yeah. Oh, that's very sad, because I was like, yeah, I agree. Accelerating Faker, you know, he's been playing super well. He came back. He's truly back on form. No, it didn't get any gold. It just went to Udyr, who is not who you want the gold on. Because even though it looks hilarious in the late game, it's not great. He doesn't utilize the items nearly as well as a Faker would, and
maybe it's time for a Lich Bane. Maybe it's carry time for the Udyr.
Oh boy. I'm here for it.
Well, speaking of carrying on Udyrs, let's see whether Cuz can make something happen up here. Mostly positioned for a counter gank, but still not going to find any joy, and I believe there was vision on the Hecarim anyway, so he just packs it up, and he's going to take the camps that are available on his top side.
This is both a classic LCK early game, where the one for all the ages, which we've seen countless times. But more importantly, it's also a game where T1 don't fight outright insane leads, and I don't think it's something that you should expect with this composition, because if you look, DRX, they have prior lanes, Ezreal and Braum. If there was a problem, it's that they're too safe, they don't actually have a lot of threats. But this is a really good sign for DRX, because previously in the last couple of series, they fell behind at this point already, and then it was a really tall order to actually get back.
Ooh, good opportunity for a trade there from Kingin, as the Hyperproc not going to nearly make up for it.
And if they can actually go and keep contesting these objectives, if they can keep denying T1 and they can find some early item spikes, we might have a series on our hands. And don't forget, yesterday we thought it was going to be a quick one for Hanwha Life as well, okay? And we all know how that turned out.
Indeed. Well, Cuz is going to try and make it a little bit more difficult here for DRX, as Kingin's going to get bullied out of the way. This is all of that extra money, Chronicler, that Cuz is putting to good use. As this tower just going to get brute force down. The plates, unfortunately, had fallen down already. However, this is going to be a good use of their time, as T1 do manage to crash the first turret of the game. So, let's see whether that 85% win rate is going to claim true.
And I think they might give up a play here, or a player in the bot side. And it will give up the Drake, which I think this is
teleport
still fine.
timing though, but no, not going to go for it. Just enough burst damage.
Yeah, I was about to say, I feel like it might be a bit much to try and contest that. You don't want to overreach your ST1 because you're still in a comfortable position. This composition doesn't need to get early leads. You just need to play the mid game well.
Well, there's the flash out, but still the Terrify is going to land onto Faker. Teleport comes on in, and Solka in a bit of trouble, has to flash out, but they still manage to pick up the kill, and Solka holds on to his huge lead that he has in that mid lane.
And if you're someone you want a gold lead on, it is Solka or Kingen. And you'll take that any day of the week. You are able to not only get the kill, sure, Zoe gives up a flash, but as Faker has shown us, flash is optional on Zoe as long as there's a team fight around you.
Yes.
And you take Faker's flash, and a Victor without flash, especially at this stage of the game where his damage, as you can see there, is not insane to the point where if you try and dive in and he like Chaos Storm and Gravity Wells on top of himself, you just immediately die. He's actually pretty vulnerable here, and this feeling of safety that he gets isn't necessarily 100% warranted, because yes, he has good topside vision and the teleport is available, but being that far up against the Hecarim at this point in time, we've always seen how that ends. And DRX finding a crucial first blood. And this is looking a little bit more like the DRX that we saw in the beginning of the split, because they don't need leads, they just need to be in the actual game, and seemingly today they are.
The thing is, like, this is a DRX that hasn't been winning lanes at all in round 2, right? Not until this game have we really seen them be able to actually command these positions on the map. So very impressive stuff so far, especially when it then results in DRX being able to play towards what is a very strong poke composition, because DRX have also had some issues where if they do try and get themselves these comps that do have lane priority, it feels messy when the teams need to be cohesive in the later stage of the game. They have won some of those games, but we won't talk about that because it's very difficult to actually tell you why. They just somehow do. But this is not flippy DRX. This is DRX understanding what they have to do and then just doing it very well.
And if they can keep playing this disciplined, I think that the next Dragon fight is really going to show what form this team is on today. Because if they get that soul point, for T1, a Mountain Soul is atrocious, because if you look at their lineup, it's very backline dive oriented. Faker.
Yeah, in goes Pyoshik, wasting no time at all, but now they're looking to try and turn this one around. Solka finds the Paddle Star out of nowhere. Cuz still looking for it. Remember, this tower is not there. He has flash available. Solka not so lucky, but Cuz doesn't want to press that flash button because it gives one potentially to the Zoe. Cuz now as well looking for Becca, who comes on in, but not going to be able to find too much.
I take it back.
There to save him.
Cuz uses the gold very well. Unfortunately, though, Faker dies again, and this is the capitalization of the flash that was blown earlier. Second time that he's been taken down, and Faker, the victor in this matchup and in this game, just means that no matter what happens as T1, you can sleep well at night, knowing, okay, listen, we have the backup insurance, right? If all else fails, Faker on his trusty Victor will be able to carry the late game team fights. That is still the case, but the more gold you give over to Solka, the harder that is going to be.
Oh, Yoshik's in trouble here. Meganar comes out and the horse smashed against the wall. Take the boulder to the face. And Kanna says, my clock tower is the last thing you're going to see. Now he's going to start stealing away the jungle from the horse, and Pyoshik, he does this sometimes just a little bit overly aggressive in his position. He knew that they were killing his inner turret.
Secret Agent Jace able to escape any vision that was thrown away, and it's yet again, yes, Faker has really good topside vision, but there's a reason why Hecarim is this popular, even with the Everfrost not being layered perfectly there. It doesn't matter, and look at the angle that Solka finds as well. Cuz trying to body block, and Solka's like, no. Not allowing you that. As, yeah, this is just, you know that there.
It's greedy, right?
It's very greedy. And this is a problem that Pyoshik has had, especially in the second half of the split, where he uses Ghost there as well, and I think that's the real egregious part, because that means that the backline of T1 is going to be not nearly as scared in this upcoming team fight. This is a fight that you need as DRX, because I talked about it's very unfortunate for T1 if you lose a Mountain Soul, because a lot of your damage is initial upfront burst. Yes, later on you'll have Victor, but before that it's Kai'Sa goes in, blows someone up, Kana goes for a big flip into the wall. You need to blow up people in like that instant. If you can't do that through a Mountain Soul, you're in a bit of trouble. That's DRX. Your poke comp does not like shield, and a global shield for the opponent team,
especially one that resets every time you get out of combat.
Not it.
Is certainly not what you want. I think an Ocean Soul would have been worse
it would have
to fight into. However, this is still pretty bad. As DRX do get position around this Drake, but now T1 want to fight for it.
Oh, Kana.
Oh, look at that Naba. That is beautiful right now as T1 wanting to try and avoid this poke. So far, so good. And Kana just skirting around the edges. You can see all of these abilities flying through, but none of them finding any joy here as DRX going to lose priority in the mid lane, and that means that they lose priority in the river. T1 will deny the soul point, and this looks a little bit like a turning of the tide.
It's a super respectful play there from DRX, which is understandable given that if you misstep there, you don't only give up the Drake, but you actually just could outright lose the game. Because if T1 gets fed, the margins, as already said, that you have with this poke composition for you to get engaged on are even thinner. The downside of that is, though, yes, that initial poke didn't hit, and I'm glad that they respected Kana, but I feel like they could have stuck around a little bit more, right? Because they did know where Kana was. It wasn't that there was going to be a Mega Knot out of nowhere, which was what T1 was initially looking for. And now you give over the first mountain. This mountain is okay, but the next one you need to 100% take. And T1 has slowly been building up the gold lead through seemingly nothing here, and it's just turrets.
Yeah, it's turrets as well as the Teddy effect. I don't know. Teddy hits around 15 minutes and then gets more farm than his opponent. It's one of like the special things on his card. Like if you pull the Teddy card out of your booster pack, it's like apply 20 CS when the timer hits 15 minutes. Because they were struggling in the lane. But of course, Teddy's ahead by 10.
So it's like a pre-evolution of Chovy, who has like the better version of that same perk.
Yeah, might actually.
Because he has plus 30.
Yeah. No,
that works.
He also finds minions that don't exist on the map.
Ah,
so
it's a different archetype.
Yeah. Even your teammates can also have like extra CS perks because I think Chovy just pulls them out of thin air. That's sort of how that one works. Certainly had a great day yesterday. Good old Chovy.
And with the current state of the game, DRX is still very much able to just hit the 2-item spikes, right? Like, look at this. King in. Not quite stacked on the Manamune, but does have that plus Eclipse. 2 items on Pioshik, 2 items on Solka. Bao finished his core items. Yes, he's still going to be looking towards as Cyril does, but he's going to be doing absurd amounts of damage if he can actually land the poke. And
I actually wouldn't mind him to even prioritize the Duskblade earlier, because the extra lethality in a poke composition could be very strong. But we'll see what he does.
I agree. I think it's the combination of the armor penetration against a rather beefy frontline in Kana, Kuz, and Carrier combined with the potential to kite back and use the slow. But you're right, if you go for like the big blowout team fights, then Duskblade is pretty insane. So
not to mention ability haste being pretty good at getting more Qs.
It is.
And now DRX do find another bubble. This is what their comp can do, right? And Mountain Rift, even though it's not exactly the greatest soul for them, like they would have loved to get an Infernal, right? Mountain Rift is a Zoe soul.
Oh yeah.
Because you can bubble through so many more things on this one. So I mean, that works out for DRX, and they get that without actually having to kill the Drakes, which is pretty cool.
On the flip side, Kana is also like, yes, more walls.
Yeah, that's actually a good point.
I don't know who benefits more from it, because you know, Ezreal can jump over walls. Kingen is also happy to have some defense. I guess it depends on who plays better, because if Kana finds a big smackdown into specifically that wall right there, you see in the, like the left part of the screen?
Yeah.
Then otherwise wouldn't be there, then we can call it.
Well, Faker doesn't like more walls.
He doesn't, no. He's had...
I'm not as happy about that.
And it says a lot about the form of T1 that, yes, Faker is getting behind, but it doesn't really warp the game to a point where we'd be worried. There have been iterations of T1 where if Faker wasn't carrying, we'd be like, oh boy, this is not looking well. But you can see the rest of the team, particularly Kana, whose turret pressure and just overall presence on the map have been super good this game.
And also, Faker doesn't need all that many resources to do his job in a team fight as well, right? Like, Teddy's been funneled quite a lot, but, you know, Faker on the Victor is just wanting to get these spells out over and over again. He has his Zhonyas now, and so going to be pretty comfortable there. And it's going to be on, you know, Teddy to find some options as far as backline. And if T1 can find their picks that they're looking for and utilize the incredible amount of map control that they've bought for themselves with all of these turrets that they've been able to take, as you can see, it's 4-1 on the turrets. T1 have done their job as far as denying what a poke composition needs, which is control of the map, but they do still need to make something happen with it.
And T1, I'm super impressed with how well they've been able to weather the storm. They need to kind of wait out this power spike from DRX though, because I feel like if you give them a leg up now, you might get into trouble, but if you weather the next 5 minutes and stay even, don't give them Soul, possibly don't even give them Soul Point, don't give them Baron, then DRX is scaling, or lack of scaling rather, is kind of going to kick in.
Oh my,
no way.
Are we really doing this? Is this really happening? Okay, no, it's given away. DRX in the area. This is ballsy from T1, yeah. Down to about half health on the Baron. T1 desperately wanting to get DRX over to this area. They are going to get their wish. As DRX wanting to try and layer some of his poke. This Baron down to about 3,000 and T1, of course, they don't want to flip. As Pyoshi going to take a bit of damage from the Baron. Now it's the blue buff being delivered over to Faker. Slow comes in. There's the Zenith Blade as Teddy comes on over. Can they lock him down? The flash forward Teddy, so aggressive as the horse will fall. Carrier taking a fair bit of damage as the Chaos Storm getting hyper value in the backline. I don't know how T1 have done this or why they decided to go for that Baron, but it worked out beautifully.
And we said T1, they have a composition where you need to pull the trigger. Well, they pulled the trigger there. Flash forward from Faker, flash forward from Teddy, flash forward from Carrier. It's still risky to go for this Baron because there's so much poke available.
It's not a flip anymore though, because there's no smite available on DRX's side. However, this is a poke composition. It wants to be in these sort of spots where they can just throw buttons at their opponent. That is going to force T1 away. The horse back up in 3 seconds time. T1 just taking 1 kill out of that. And now, it looks like this Mountain Drake will be taken by DRX. So after all the dust settles, this actually is a win for DRX.
It's a win. You trade your jungler. Unfortunate, sure. As Pyoshi yet again gets caught in position where he's not really allowed to be for... He just gets greedy, right? And this is miscommunication, because you can't do this if the rest of your team not there. If everyone else is there, you're fine. Instead, he has to use everything that he has defensively. Will still go down in the very end. Also, look at this flash forward from Faker that's about to come in here, because if he doesn't get exhausted, I think DRX gets chunked way more, and then T1 might feel a lot more comfortable going for that follow-up Baron. Instead, this matchup still on the knife's edge, but we've seen teams in a position for Soul Point before, and it just means that T1, now they can't really mess up anymore. A single mess up, a single catch, and you lose the Soul.
Yeah. They can mess up maybe in the next 2 minutes.
That's okay.
You know, because then they can't throw the Soul. However, after that, no messing up at all, T1. Make sure that you're paying attention. It's only 1,500 gold the lead here, and you did mention, you know, like, this is DRX, right? They've come back from worse.
Oh yeah,
they absolutely have. Sort of their way. And with the fact that it's 4-2 in turrets, this lead is basically not real. As Kingen going to find a few friends. Pyoshik also going to get rid of Teddy immediately after the Killer Instinct. A lot of CC, takes about 4 turret shots, and Teddy will be taken down. The Jace is going to be traded, but now Cuz running into the enemy base. It's precisely not what you want, so here's the mess up. It was within a minute, so they're not going to lose the Drake. However, still a bad sign.
Timing, not the worst, but the play there was an attempt from T1 to salvage the side lane pressure. You do have the availability of the Killer Instinct for Kai'Sa to try and set these plays. However, there's 2 prerequisites. One, you need to actually be able to kill Kingen, which they did, but it took way too long. Secondly, even though they had vision in the immediate part of the jungle, they didn't actually know where everyone on DRX was, so it was a really, really deep play. Didn't quite work out. T1, though, still going to contest his Baron.
Yep, 3 versus 4 right now. 6,000 health on the Baron. Canna wanting to get that Nabard charge. Remember, this is exactly what Faker wants. This is precisely the position a Victor is in love with, as Becca has to get out of there. Pyoshik as well is almost dead. Kerry is going to be traded for as Canna gets to the Mega Gnar in the nick of time. but the Baron is still going to be warded off, and that was 100% because Faker existed. He almost has that Chaos Storm back available as well, as Kingan's going to turn up one more time. I believe he's completely invisible to T1. Now Teddy getting into the area, and now we're just going back again as they force the reset. The Braum is still backing. The Pyoshik's coming from base right now.
It's fast.
Bubbles still getting on in here. Yeah, remember, this is Kai'Sa. She does do a lot of damage to the Baron, but once again, T1 are not willing to flip, and they back away. But the gold lead is shrinking. That Drake still belonged to DRX, and the more T1 do this and don't get anything for it, the worse it's going to be.
And I like the idea of catching someone in the side lane, but again, the rest of T1 isn't actually ready to follow up on this play. And look at this fear, because it puts Teddy in a position where he takes 2 extra turret shots. Otherwise, that Kai'Sa might be way healthier.
Oh, yeah.
Just has to basically say, okay, I'm dead here anyway. I'm just going to try and run through the base store as long as I can. And then it is the combination of, as you say, the Victor who loves people clumping up in tight spaces, even without his Chaos Storm. And also Karnas, who's like playing so well to the limits of this Gnar. You know, the moment that Mega Gnar comes in, you need to be out of there.
Yeah. The death rate value that Faker was getting there, as you can see, was very, very high as we're going to jump back into this one. Kingan taking a bit of damage here from Canna, but trading it back relatively well as well. Sterix is now on the Gnar, so the trading is going to be a little bit more difficult for this Jace in the side lanes, who is building towards his armor penetration, so that's going to help him out in the matchup. Faker's got a Lich Bane, man. This guy is looking to fight extended trades. Oh no, Kingan caught out in his jungle. That is precisely not what you want. As now T1 with 48 seconds on this mountain. We said that T1 can't make the mistakes if this Drake is going to be available. Well, DRX also can't, because that will put an extra dampener on that timer.
One upside is that they do have pressure around the Baron area, and as long as Carrier doesn't find a big opening, it's kind of hard for T1. You see, if they catch someone, they can blow them up quickly. This was a similar attempt to what we saw earlier, this time, however, effectively, because once you actually get on top of King and he doesn't have flash, he dies very quickly to Udyr and Gnar.
Yep.
Not a lot that is in there in terms of counterplay for him. Drake will go over. I was thinking maybe DRX, if they want to play it greedy, they can try and look for a play on that Baron, or at least threaten it at the very least, force T1 into a comfortable macro position. But instead, it looks like this game, like the first game yesterday, is just gonna go the distance, Atlas, because it doesn't looking like there's any resolvement as of yet. It'll, oh, I always need to be careful, but it's not a Jinx ult.
Yeah.
I
saw like, it was True Shot Barrage, not a Super Mega Death Rocket, and I was like, it's okay. There's no need to get excited at this stage. You may have been thinking that the teleport was available, Kingan was going to spawn as the Drake was spawning, but one of the really important things to understand about a poke composition is you need setup, right? And so they were never going to get the setup, which is why they had to forfeit the Drake, no matter what, just in case anyone was curious. But this gold lead has not changed, Chronicle. It is flatlining this game. This is like very, very slow, cool, calm, connected. And yes, this was a mistake from Kingan, but didn't really cost DRX too much other than losing a timer towards that potential Mountain Drake for themselves. Goshik's ghosting. They're looking for Faker right now as the gravity field is going to work. The flash comes out, devastating charge. Only going to move Faker closer to safety, but flash away from the Victor, so important.
This time, Faker does have the Zhonya's available, so while the flash being gone is still a dangerous position to be in, it's not as bad as it would otherwise be, as Cuz.
He's supposed to be tanky. Going to have to flash out as well. Count him. That is 2 flashes now down, and DRX using this as a sign to potentially go for this Baron. Gnar is on the bottom side of the map, teleport in hand. And it is going to come through here. Let's see whether DRX can actually find this. As they're looking to try and collapse on the one. I do like the idea. However, Canna is able to get out of the way with that extra movement speed.
And both teams are playing really, really respectfully, and it makes sense considering this is a best of 5, and it's just, it feels so good to get an initial play right, as they're still going to go for the Baron.
Yep, they thought that DRX had actually gone for a reset here as they see Kingan in the mid lane. All right, is the team fight. Big Gnar into the wall, but only really landing onto Becca, who goes golden as well, soaking so much of this damage. Chaos Storm is going to wear out as Teddy tries to be a hero 1v3 in the back line. Does he have the ability to keep himself alive? He flashes into the wall, will be taken down, and Bao will survive. And T1 are limping away from this battle. Faker now in trouble. Remember that flash from earlier? Yeah, you ain't getting out of that one. T1, and Pioshik will take down the man in the mid lane, and T1 make a fumble that could cost them this Baron.
And they want to pull the trigger, understandably, but I feel like, as you said, they blew everything on Becca. It's just a Braum. He stalls with his shield, then he stalls with the stopwatch, and that means that DRX, after all, now going to be able to pick up the Baron here. And a poke composition with Baron at this point in the game is insane.
Yeah.
And normally I'd say this is like a last hurrah for DRX, but if I see how well they're playing, I don't actually know, Atlas, as everything gets used. Kana tries to go for the hop, is forced to use his flash there, and I think that he thought that Sorka was what Becca was, but Sorka was coming from the top side of the pit, so you don't actually get anything. Teddy goes in super huge. If you blow up Bao there, fine. You know, you can salvage this fight, but instead, basically everything gets thrown to kill a Braum. Pioshik still has his ultimate available throughout this entire team fight. Faker doesn't even get to click his stopwatch. And getting siege on with this composition is bad, but even worse, in 1 minute and 40 seconds, is that soul point, Atlas.
Exactly, and this Baron should be able to taxi into that one very, very comfortably. And this is something that you don't necessarily have to talk about when it comes to poke compositions, because once the poke composition is in a good spot, sieging becomes kind of irrelevant because you've already done your job and you should be winning the game. However, we now need to mention, because we're at that point in the game, poke comps are really good at sieging, like super ridiculously mega good at sieging. As you could understand, they have a lot of range, they have a lot of damage that they can throw down without having to commit to anything, and that makes things real tough. They can also put Pioshik in the side lane if they would like to, because his job in a poke comp is be a horse, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah.
Be a offensive or defensive horse, depending on what the moment calls for.
Yeah.
Or defensively or offensively, both are really fine. As long as you carry stay alive, you're happy.
Well, he's just going to dive in underneath this turret, able to sprint his way out as well, as you can see, buying a lot of space to get damage down. They have this siege minion doing a fair bit of work as well. And this turret not going to last very long whatsoever. As the last few autos, this should be the inhibitor going down. You saw Kana was able to get that minion wave move towards that top side very comfortably. So DRX is going to have to do a little bit more housekeeping before they can break apart the base anymore. Now, this inhibitor, they're looking to try and take this before they get out. Void Seeker not going to find too much joy. T1 still trying to get this setup in position. T1 now feeling like it's their opportunity to move in. Does over to the side, Bubble will connect, base gate going to be there, but still gonna get chunked. Solka does so much damage. And now Kanna's gonna dive forward, gets the Gnar back on through, good wallop, and Bao disappears from the fight. Now running away is the Udyr, not gonna be so safe, but the bottom lane's dead. The Jace is dead, and Faker is at full health. Carrier able to get all of his CC down, and DRX will be lying on the floor. Carrier even presses his stopwatch. He will, no, I was about to say that he was gonna go down. Eventually he does, but that is the ace for T1, and the teleports erupt on the top side of the map. Faker will return the favor, and the inhibitor wasn't even taken.
It's the OG T1 special. They look like you don't know what's happening, you don't know what's going on. They're
like an injured gazelle with a minigun hiding in their pocket.
One team fight is all they need, and it is Kana that finds the engage. And we didn't have the time because so much has been happening in the last couple of minutes of this game, but you saw when Bao went for that, and not actually gonna end. I got a little overexcited. How can you not? And I think if that was Kana, they might have actually been fine. But the key thing here is, how do you get on top of Bao? Because his damage is obscene at this point in time. They get a little greedy in trying to farm damage for Cuz, and it's Kana on the Gnar of all picks that finds the lockdown.
Range as well. Damn, that could have looked really silly, but instead, that's probably the game-winning play if T1 walk away with game one.
I agree, 100%, because that right there is the answer to a question that is really hard for T1, which is how do you deal with Ezreal? Sure, Zoe and Jace are somewhat immobile, right? Those are picks, especially without flash, that are pretty easy peasy to get to. But Bao is an Ezreal that has hit his item spikes, he has cleanse and flash available, and he's a Braum standing by his side. Actually getting on top of him in a team fight is a nightmare, and it's up to Carrier and Kana to actually make that work, because you see the moment that Ezreal goes down, there is plenty of damage on the side of T1, and Bao has also realized that, because looking at inventory, the taxes have been paid.
Indeed. QSS now put together. Bao should be able to finish off his build pretty soon, and it's going to be one that doesn't actually have a mythic in it. As was very popular on Ezreal initially. We've seen a lot of Duskblades put together, but despite what I was talking about, he is just going to completely ignore it. Of course, Ravenous Hydra very, very strong on the Ezreal, especially in against a short-range composition like T1s. I feel like you would get a lot of extra value there. But as we saw, the Drake was taken by Canna as well. And so 3.5 minutes and it's soul point for both teams. As now Kingen possibly in trouble here on the side lane as the bubble didn't actually connect there onto Cuz, who is, he's just running real fast. 5-0-4 on Canna's Gnar right now. And look, I've been one of the people that has said some nasty things about Gnar, but after that last play, I feel like all of us Gnar haters are looking real silly.
It's just how well Kana is playing, really.
Yeah, right.
And the amount of pressure that he had, barring the very early game where, as expected, Kingen was able to output pressure, was able to put a lot of threat on the top laner, with a little bit of help from Cuz, who was mainly there just to make sure that Pioshi doesn't run over him. Kana has been playing so incredibly well, and the teamfight threat and space that he provides for Faker and Teddy to do their thing is exceptional. Honestly, the only thing in the T1 comp where I'm like, I don't know how this is going to work out, and we saw it earlier, is that Kai'Sa for Teddy, because I believe in Teddy to have a good impact. But the nature of Kai'Sa in her current form means she's so binary, right? You need to kind of go in, otherwise you don't provide a lot of value, especially into a DRX comp that has so much range available.
Yeah. Well, Super Minions are pushing down the top side. We've got a teleport in from Canna. This is very far away from this Baron that is being burst down extraordinarily quickly. Cuz wanted to get in there and make it a 50-50. Voidseeker goes wide. The Baron very low. Now Pioshi looking for the turn. Teddy avoids him completely. Devastating charge onto Faker. Teddy just going to play it defensively. I love it from this guy. His carrier will be taken down, but another flash Gnar from Canna, and he says no. We are winning game one. Faker goes golden. That's the ace. Quadra kill for Teddy, and that is going to be game.
In the very end, T1 finds the flank, finds the fight that they were looking for. The kite back on that final fight was beautiful, because you saw DRX, they thought they had the opening. Kana was nowhere to be seen. He was charging up his Mega Bar on the Krugs, but still, they weren't fast enough. And that is the one downside of the DRX comp. Actually hard engaging without the setup isn't what you do very well.
Yeah.
You need time.
Just a beautifully well-played last two team fights from T1, and I can't overstate this, I was expecting this game to be way less close than this.
Agreed.
And I also thought that perhaps the drafts would be a little bit closer as well. I feel like DRX got almost exactly what they needed in order to win the DRX way, right?
Yep.
Because, you know, it's a flippy comp, but they're the kind of team that does love to play around these knife's edges, and they have been able to do it in the past, and it looked like it was working until, you know, Canna finds the flash Gnars, and T1 just team fights so beautifully.
It's basically, whereas the poke composition is DRX, like, you basically have, every time these placements, you have like one shot to get onto Bao, to get onto the enemy backline, right? And that's all you're looking for. And you can see Kana's charging up on vision.
So good though.
And that's why DRX pulled the trigger, which makes sense, but they don't actually have the comp to do this, right? It's not a composition that excels at fighting these fights, at engaging into an enemy that's kiting back. You see the Braum ultimate does basically nothing, and then Carrier, he doesn't kill Bao, but he forces the flash and the cleanse, meaning that Kana comes in and sees a tasty snack.
Exactly, and look, you can buy as many QSSs as you want. If you're just thrown into a wall, I mean, how many options do you have? Not so many, and Teddy picks up that quadra kill. I absolutely loved how he utilized his killer instinct this time around. He was hyper aggressive in the previous team fight. Did not work out, actually looked a little bit silly for it. Instead, what you do is you solidify your front to back, stand back with Faker, allow your tanks to actually do their job, and then understand that Carrier is obviously going to land a surprise Zenith Blade on the Ezreal in the backline, because he's Carrier. Easy peasy.
Yeah,
that's the game plan. So instead, just killer instinct back, kill the horse, and then pick up 3 extra kills afterwards. No worries, that's in the textbook, I think.
It's a deserved win for T1, but the performance from DRX here is also a big story of this game to me.
Absolutely.
I think it's deserved that T1 win, because they pull the trigger at the right time every single time. It's almost dumb on Kia-esque, where you're like, you're waiting for that moment, and then they find the moment, they make the moment work. But DRX looked way more like first half of the split DRS, and I'm hoping that they can maintain that form, because then the series all of a sudden becomes a lot more interesting.
It absolutely does. Let's have a look at the post-game breakdown to see who was responsible for all of those big damages. I imagine that gentleman in the mid lane is going to be doing some work, and indeed he does. 29k for Faker. Victor pretty good at doing damage. Ezreal damage and Zoe damage actually a little bit lower than expected, to be perfectly honest. I felt like Bao could have had a little bit more of an impact that game, but shout out to Kingen, who was definitely landing a few of these shock blasts.
And it says a lot to the threat of T1, to the threat of Carrier and Kana, that were like, those were the ones you need to play around, right, as Zoe and Ezreal. Yep. Those are the ones you need to avoid. If you don't know what Kana or Carrier is, you see what happens. Carrier lands a Zenith Blade over the wall. That normally is not supposed to happen.
Yeah, no, it's just ridiculous. But we made a little bit of a mistake, ladies and gentlemen. So let's bring up the fan vote once again, and actually love this. It was slightly in error, about 5% of a shift. But after this game, I'm actually feeling like there was a bit of a 5% shift back towards the DRX camp with how much better they were playing than expected. Of course, the result going to be what we thought, but maybe, just maybe, things could change as we move further forward, because the draft, if it's going to continue like that, maybe DRX can find some holes. But, ladies and gentlemen, this best of 5 will continue, but after the break.
나 좀 멀어. 살면서 해봐.
이제 클린드 빠졌어.
리드
클린드
빨리
빠졌어. 비정 왔어.
오른쪽 좋아.
나이스.
나이스.
네. 그런 부분을 좀 10분 활용하려고 하는 것 같고요. 캐리어가 안쪽 맵.
캐리어가 안쪽 맵.
매서운데요. 기다렸다가 배치기 아꼈다가 뜯었죠.
결국은 여기서
예.
제디와 캐리.
야 진짜 캐리어.
팝을. 분명히. 그러면 캐리어 가요.
그러면 페이커. 캐리어 페이커. T1.
이것이 T1의 전투력.
말 그대로 벼락같이 들어가서 한 방에 쓸었어요. 맞았어요.
그냥 속박.
진입 안쪽으로 들어갑니다. 와. 모든 T1. 네. 데미지가 한나가 일단 핑퐁. 네. 한나가 핑퐁. 한나가 들어오고요.
또 했어요.
유지력, 유지력.
저 뒤에.
한나가 터졌으면 모르겠는데.
예, 안쪽에 갔다가. 그래도 불 던지고.
눌러가 캐리 어떻게든 눌러가.
네, 진짜 여기서 다 잡아야 되는데. 눌러가 다 잡아야 되는데. 눌러가 다 잡아야 되는데. 아무도 없는데요. 이거 다 잡아야 되는데.
다 잡을
네.
수가 없습니다.
캐리가 마무리됐습니다.
T1.
바위기 전력도
네.
같습니다. 이거 보거든요.
일단 뒤쪽으로 빠지면서 헷갈린 진입.
깊게 들어갔어요. 깊게.
이게 싸움이 여기서 안 끝나면 앙코르
들어왔죠.
앙코르 제대로 들어갔죠. 그리고
풀 밀긴 했습니다만.
근데 딜이 약간 모자란 느낌이 있고 앞으로 밀고 들어갔죠. T1.
이거를.
와.
이렇게 잘랐습니다.
페이커
거든요.
이게 일단 킬 스코어가 어마어마하게 벌어졌고요. T1이 압도적으로 이거를 밀리면서 보완하겠다는 건데 이 다음 리치는 좀 저 죽으면 안 되고
포탑이 남아있으니까 포탑의 힘으로.
네, 킹겐이 오래 버티긴 했으면
네.
잡혔고 여기서 추격
한 번 더. 일로 와.
추격파까지 들어가
바울까지.
바우가 근데 좀
돌아요. 바울가 돌아요. 바울.
그 다음에 자 메가나르
나와서 싸움으로.
그 다음에
떨어졌고요.
거기서 바우가 도이며 바우가 그냥 때리며 바우가 돌아다니며 바우가 도이면 세상이 돌아요 협곡이 돌아요
내날 여기에 갈려버렸습니다.
아니 이러면 진짜 그리고 심지어 도망가기까지 최대한 그러니까 다시
싸움 다시 하나요?
안쪽에서 양해 안 치죠 양해 안 치죠
제가 버텼어요.
끝난 다음에 모두에 안 치죠 그리고
해나가 들어가요.
아니 방금 진지영계가 또 미친 듯이 잘 들어 조이가 마무리를 못 시켜요 지금 사이드가 어떻게든 빨갛다 안 돼요 위에 그래서 아래쪽도 이렇게 되면 야롱도 위험하죠
오자마자
언제든지 뒤를 잡을 수 있는 강점이 있는 챔피언 마공 알리사 등장
그리고
포카 조이
조이 들어가요.
나르 그리고 메가나르가 앞라인 잡아줬어 카이사 들어갔죠 카이사 녹였죠 이 다음에
다음으로 뜨죠.
근데 왕타가 안 맞았어요 근데 코드라 정글 펜타
포드라.
헤카리 정글
아니, 이거
펜타
정글
펜타
펜타킬.
교체
Hello and welcome back everybody to the LCK Analyst Task for the second day of playoffs round 1, and we'll be joined by 정현이, B3 and Gorilla. And we're heading to the end of the spring split, and we're having a lot of contenders to win the title in the end. And today we're kicking off playoff round 1, day number 2 between T1 and DRX. And T1, the spring gods are slowly coming back. They were able to turn around the game at the end of the last moment, and they were able to close out the game. DRX had a very decent comp, but they were not able to capitalize on their lead. So we said every time that poke comp is about hitting the opponents with the wallet, and T1 at the same time they were not having the best time in the mid and early game, but still they were able to get the early herald and win macro by taking down the opponent's turret. So both of the teams made it to the point where they could come back after losing some lead, but T1 was doing a fantastic work, especially about their play, because DRX, because they had a poke comp, T1 didn't actually contest for the early Drakes, and rather Udyr was rotating towards the top side of the map in order to open up more space for Gnar, and Kai'Sa is also a really nice champion to follow up for some side lane play setup. So Gnar was able to win side lane up against Jace, so T1 was able to capitalize on that point. This is the first game between those two teams heading into the best of 5 in the split. So there were some points where both teams not performing at their best level, but the most decisive factor was the experience difference about the T1's winning mentality. Even though T1 was slightly falling behind, they always stayed really calm. But on the other hand, as the game was heading to a very end, DRX was getting very hurry and they were in a rush and they kind of forced open a fight in the end and they had to give away the win. Now let's take a look at this first highlight. T1 was actually handing over some of the control of the game over to DRX, so they were getting over eager for that Baron try, and Gnar failed to jump over that wall. And so Braum was the only one getting stunned by that Gnar, and Braum is a really tanky champion. He was able to soak up a lot of damage. Kai'Sa will fly to the backline in order to find some heroic moment, but because of the exhaust and the damage coming out from Zoe and Ezreal, DRX was able to pick up a win in the end of this team fight. And Victor, prior to this fight, he traded his summoner spell with Hecarim, so he was not able to escape that chase as well. I think team fight opening and initiation was really crucial for both teams because DRX especially, they had a poke comp. So if they miss some of the poke abilities, which it means T1 gets the agenda to open team fight, whereas T1 had a late game scaling pick, which means they can take up some of the damage in the early game and they have this late game power spike and they can turn it around based on the power that Gnar has, the initiation power of this single champion. So there were some issues to be solved on the side of both teams, but T1 was the one finding the solution. Now let's take a look at this second highlight. DRX is a team packed up with the rookie players, so they were not able to find the closing moment of the game, and they were in a rush. So there was a big wave heading to the top lane. So DRX wanted to first open a fight by starting this Baron, which means now it's gonna be 5-on-5, and Gnar was making his rotation in a flank position. So DRX had this information that Kana is in a flank angle state, so they wanted to open fight before he arrives here. But because they were in a big rush, Hecarim actually went in and found only one target with his ultimate, which was Leona. Not the best value you can find over there. Whereas T1, they had a lot of tools to kind of take this fight and turn it around. So Pyosik, he can dive onto the enemy backline, but at the same time, he needs a follow-up and a backup from his damage carries in order to lock down kills. Well, I can understand the thoughts of DRX right here. They really wanted to open fight in order to take a decisive kind of team fight, but Pyosik, because he was playing under a huge pressure, the only one to open team fight on the side of DRX, he was rushing into the opponent's face and he was not able to find a successful team fight initiation, and T1 was easily able to take that fight over, and Kana will pick up the POG on Gnar. Kana is back, the Kana that we remember from last year. Jace is a classic counter for Gnar, but T1 decided to adjust their strategy, so they did not focus on the early objectives. Rather, Kana and Udyr, Cuz, was playing together on the top side of the map, allowing Kana to not get behind in the early game. Rather, Kana was able to outplay his lane opponent and control the side lane in the later phase as well. And right here in this team fight, Kana was able to land this boomerang on the enemy AD carry, so he was able to double jump and find a huge CC onto the multiple members of DRX. So DRX has to kind of work on their draft strategy because Jace into Gnar was not as effective as we all expected. And 9 out of 9 POG votes secured by Kanas with his 10 out of 10 performance. Now we're heading into game number 2 between T1 and DRX. You know, T1 in the spring split and the playoffs is always super strong, but we saw a huge opening and lighting coming out from DRX. So let's head over to the second game.
Thank you so much, Jisun, as usual, for the immaculate translation of the analyst desk. And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Uribank playoffs here for LCK Spring 2021. T1, look, I felt like a little bit of that game was T1 playing against their draft, and I'd be very interested in seeing what they're going to do the next time around, because I think having some time in the break, right, we were very excited about some of the flanks, some of the engages that T1 were able to get, but we do need to talk about how it got there and what happened at the beginning, because I think the draft made the game more difficult for T1 than it needed to be.
I think DRX, their response was super good. They went for the Ezreal Braum, seemingly out of nowhere. The Ezreal makes a little bit of sense, and with Braum I think we've seen like once or twice maybe. It's not a super popular pick at the moment, he's not at the forefront of the meta, but into a composition that basically has one shot to get on your backline, then kill them, and otherwise lose. It made a lot of sense, and I still think that the DRX played that game in terms of how they played around the strategy very well. However, in terms of macro, some of the Baron calls for both teams with a little bit of back and forth, a little bit too much tension possibly also for DRX, who are of course fighting their way back out of the slump. And I think that game number 1 is the best way that you can do that. That even though you lose it, right? You go into the game like, listen, we had a nice draft, we had really good early game. We were able to consistently out-skirmish them. Happy with all of that. It just came down to the final execution. And that's a loss that I think you'll take as DRX, because if you look at the last couple of weeks, I wasn't expecting this to be this close.
No, absolutely not. I 100% agree on that front, as DRX are going to ban Senna and Thresh on blue side. I think the Thresh ban is quite odd, but looks like DRX are going to be gunning for either the Hecarim or the Seraphine, depending on which one is going to be left available. Trist going to be taken away once again, and this is a blue side ban strategy that is certainly a deviation from what we saw in game number 1. It was OP, OP, OP for DRX. They managed to take away the Senna, Seraphine, and the Thresh, but T1 with a different mindset, trying to leave as many things open and trying to get as many of them for themselves as they can, as Renekton in the final ban here from DRX.
Presumably a Seraphine ban coming out from T1, meaning that DRX then get the Hecarim again, which this time there's no Udyr available for Cuz, meaning that he will be forced onto possibly something like the Nidalee. That's what junglers often go into when there is a Hecarim, so you can't really play the Lilia, right? That's not a matchup where you're ever going to feel good.
Where's
but
the Volibear, though?
I was
oh, sorry.
You read my mind, Atlas. I was going to go there, but you went there before I did. So yeah, Volibear. I think that is a pick that, even though it hasn't been shown yet, T1 knows that we can go, but I'm not you know my opinion on leaving open Seraphine.
Yep, looks like we've got a tied series. Let's go. No, look, I don't think it's 100% over just yet. I think that Sulka's Seraphine has been up or down, you know. I think that there is not necessarily all that much skill expression when it comes to Seraphine, but we have seen her either look completely impossible to deal with, but she's also lost, right? So let's see what T1 do have as far as their plan. Varus just going to be locked in immediately.
Wow, that is an interesting, and I gotta imagine it's going to be Serpent's Fang Varus.
So.
This has got to be lethality Varus. I don't want to see no lethal tempo coming into this game. Although we have seen a variation of Varus where they go for lethal tempo but still build lethality because it gives you the ability to kind of swap later in the game, which I think is really interesting.
That was actually that was Deft.
Deft, yeah.
When he debuted the Varus this season.
Yeah.
He did do that.
And it's nice. T1 are just going for a run back, and while it's not exactly the same draft, with the Nidalee, you know what's coming. It's going to be something like a Volibear, maybe it will be a Camille, but something that can actually get on top of this Gnar, lock him down, blow him up in squishy form, and presumably something similar from the top side. The key thing here about the Varus is that if we can get Teddy ahead, then a big problem of the Seraphine kind of becomes null, because if you just blow up people before they get the opportunity to be healed up, you're like, yeah, sure, that works. And
yeah.
As you already pointed out, and I think it's really important to note, yes, Serpent's Fang is really strong, but it's an awkward item to build for a lot of crit AD carries, because it doesn't really slot into your build, as well as previously the Collector did, which also was a lethality item, but had crit on it, so you still hit your 100% crit mark a lot earlier. But Varus, especially lethality Varus, will have no such qualms, and starting to look like T1 is actually going for an aggressive poke composition, which is basically a flip from last game, because the DRX comp, they want a group. This is a tasty Sylas angle, though. There's some good ults on the opposing team.
And it is also something that can go towards the top side as well. Still a fair bit of flexibility here on T1's side. If they would like to go there, the Lucian is going to be banned away, as it's an interesting ban, to be perfectly honest. This is T1 assuming that DRX could still potentially flex, just because Lucian, especially picked alongside Lilia, is a mid lane option. It's not like they're banning away bottom lane Lucian, so they're expecting the Seraphine to either go into the AD carry position or into support. Thank you, Reckless, for forcing me to say that. As Tahm Kench going to be taken away from Carrier, and this is something we've seen alongside the Varus.
100% the right call. I think that normally you'd be like, you know, Tahm Kench might be played, but it's Carrier. He's got multiple POGs on it. Just don't let him have it.
Yeah.
It's just not okay. And Varus, one of his weaknesses is, of course, that he is immobile. Yes, he has some form of defense in his ultimate, but as a whole, he pairs well with things like the Fresh that can both set him up and defend him, or the Tahm Kench, whose setup is not as strong, but very clearly is able to kind of keep him safe. Interestingly enough, this might be like a situation where T1 you're thinking about now picking up the Braum yourself, just for like the sheer amount of safety that it can provide for your carry. And if DRX find a little bit more backline dive, if they find an aggressive support here to go with what is already a pretty threatening type of death ball composition, as not as much peel, but a lot of offensive setup for Nidalee and for the Varus ultimates. And T1, this is looking similar, where they go for a draft that says we go in and either we win immediately or it's over.
Yeah, and the other option here for Carrier was just running back the Leona once again. I think that could have been a little bit more of a slightly more defensive option if you would like to. However, both of these supports just go in and most of the time die. As here is the Xayah, locked away for Bao. Definitely a defensive choice here, as it's just going to be the Lovers duo there on the bottom side. And now let's see where Canna's going to go, or whether T1 have something strange planned for us.
The DRX comp doesn't have traditional frontline, it just has a Gnar, but the combo, the wombo combo of a Gnar, Seraphine, and Rakan is disgusting. That's not okay, Atlas. That is not fun to play against, and
this is rough, actually.
Yeah.
I was actually going to praise DRX for locking in the Gnar, because Seraphine Sion is free win territory, right? Like, that is just very scary. However, Gnar does very well into Sion in the lane, but what T1 have done, they've gone and just picked the Sion into the Gnar anyway without having the Seraphine payoff on top of it. This is going to give them, you know, a big burly guy. Does give T1 a lot more options when it comes to team fighting, and even having Faker on Sylas, he's going to be able to run around that front line alongside the Sion and cause a ruckus. But it is definitely a very different feel on this side, and I'm not sure how I feel about it.
The thing for T1 is that whether or not this is successful, in my opinion, hinges on two things. One, can Kana stay alive and do well versus not with no attention whatsoever, because that's angle 2. I think Cuz is super enabled by the mid and bot side, because Teddy and Carrier will have perma prior, right? Varus is an incredibly strong lane, and the Fatality Varus even more so. And Silas, while his laning phase and straight up head-to-head aren't great, and engaging onto a Solka with beat drop is a little bit awkward, the skirmishing, the setup, and the pressure that should come out from that duo, combined with a Rel that can possibly roam, is insane. So basically T1 need to leave Kana alone, snowball the rest of the map, and then you're gonna be fine. But then if you look at the late game, if you don't outright stomp, this is like an Exodia level comp. Okay, the Gnar is a little bit, you know, he's a little bit conditional, but everything else, like, come on, Atlas, that is not,
Yeah, it's definitely tough. And yes, they will get outranged. I think the poke advantage is once again, like, on the red side of the Rift, right? However, there is dive options. They have the quickness, they have all of the defense available for Azire as well. I actually completely agree with you. When it comes to, you know, getting a death ball and having it work, the AoE, CC, all of the options here are for DRX, plus they have Seraphine.
Because T1's fight late game, unless, again, Teddy and Cuz get, like, monstrously fat and you just blow people up, what's gonna happen is you're gonna want to front-to-back team fight. The sign really, like, basically forces you into that. If you would have gone for a Camille, you have a completely different draft where you can try to go for 4-1, poke a little bit, hang back, have your Camille skill up in the side lane and try to go from there. Instead, you kind of want a team fight later now because that's where Sign gets the most value, but you're going to have a Silas who wants to dive into the enemy backline. You're going to have a Nidalee who outside of the spears kind of want to jump in. And you're jumping into a Xayah with Clench and Feather Storm and a Seraphine.
Yeah.
That's not good, Atlas, and I feel like this is a repeat of game number 1 where if T1 win this, which I can still see happen after that first game,
This is what's really hard.
Yes.
Veronica, I agree, because even in game number 1, we had the same problem where we're like, DRX have a really good draft. Is Faker going to find himself a bit of a trade? He actually walks past and nice spots out Pyoshik as well. Just, hey, what's going on in here? Successful, as Becca's standing on a ward. And let's just see how everything does go. I do find it very difficult because T1 they manage to find victories with these drafts that do make people a little bit upset. You know, sometimes they shouldn't win, but they do because they understand that even though the win conditions are narrow, they can hit them.
And it's something that Damwon Kia does insanely well, but Damwon Kia's drafts
are also really good.
Yeah, so that's a big difference, because at Damwon Kia you're always like, wow, not only is this draft really good, but even if they do get into a deficit, they can just win. Whereas T1, it feels like they just need to outmuscle their opponent. And why do you do this, T1? You don't need to put yourself in a position where you need to, like, stomp the enemy. Because yes, you can do it, but what if you don't?
It's real rough.
Yeah.
It is definitely real rough. Is level 2 going to be gained here by Bao and Becca. Teddy and Carrier already having theirs. Carrier not exactly going to have the greatest of times here in this lane, in theory.
We also...
He's just pretty hopelessly melon.
We also have double longsword starts here for both AD carriers, which I think is interesting, not opting into what you normally see, which would be a Doran's Blade. And for Teddy, it makes a lot of sense because you can go for a tier first on the Fatality Varus, but it really...
Pod, I was expecting to.
Both are fine. I personally like the tier because it does give you a lot of early potential to, like, really shove the wave. Just use your mana as a resource in that regard. Yep. But it does mean that until you're first back, your Qs just kind of tickle, and that makes you sad because you want to blow people up. Oh, early angle from Cuz here.
Yeah, looking to try and go aggressive. Is going to wrap all the way around. You can see Bao and Becca not getting wind of this just yet as the crashdown comes through. Carrier with a really nice stun spear. Not going to connect, but Bao still taking a lot of damage. The empowered pounce and the ignite going to come in, but the answering kill is there for Bao. As that is some feathers from the grave, picking up a follow-up kill.
And it goes to Bao. It doesn't go to Becca.
Oh, beat drop is going to connect here as Faker going to have to watch out. Doesn't say eat just yet as the bowling ball will connect eventually. But Faker not having to flash, he'll be absolutely fine.
Not super happy, but with Soka's mana bar already expanded and the general lack of kill threat from Seraphine, it's not the worst. But the fact that Becca doesn't get the kill there with his ignite, but it actually goes to Bao, as you said, feathers from the grave, means that that's actually way better, right? Because yes, a kill goes to Cuz, that's nice, but he died. That's time that he didn't spend farming. He will be on the ward, so there's no way that Soka should ever die here, which he won't, so that's good.
Yep.
But means Pioshik was able to just keep going. Yes, he ganked, but he still was able to find a lead. I think he might have gone for the topside Skydoll as well, just find a full clear. So now you have a lead on that. Topside is going great. And if that spear connects, none of this is an issue.
Yeah, that's the trouble, right? And it's a good cleanse out of Desire. That's why it actually missed in the end. So shout outs to Bao there for being able to reposition and not allow that free spear.
The one upside is that with Flash Gun on Xayah, if T1 hits level 6 earlier, you can just you kill Xayah. It's just a free all-in. There's no cleanse, there's no flash, and you just jump on top of him, you throw your ultimates, and then you're basically good to go.
Varus presses WQ and then say goodbye to half of your health bar.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I guess how it works. Kingen up here just continuing to get the shove onto the Scion, who is behind, but we of course expect it. Carrier looking to try and get some control back as Teddy wants to stop the Rel from being denied and will be successful in that one. Carrier can crash down as well. He's going to flash on in. You were talking about the lack of flash. Certainly going to be important as Faker finds the abscond, but able to body block is Becca, so Bao will survive this time.
Defensive play has been super good from DRX. Every time that T1 go for a big play, you see the defensive Rakan play, making it so much harder to actually execute well on the play. Sulkai's ultimate.
Yeah, does actually find it here onto Faker. The beat drop's going to connect as well, and Faker, you can't Kingslayer enough out of that one. The watch out Eve is not going to be watched out of, and Pioshik will be able to grab that one. Second kill for DRX, who have started off very well. And this is now Solka being able to get plates for his Seraphine, looking to try and power towards that Moonstone. This is frightening if you're a T1 fan.
Remember what we said about T1 kind of having to win early on the bot side and mid?
Yeah.
It's not going super well, Atlas.
Look,
Teddy has a lead, okay? So that's
that.
nice, but that is also it.
And look, Teddy has a lead because he stayed alive, right? Bao didn't get so lucky as Carrier going to find the Attract Repel stump. There's the flash on in from Pioshik. It's a very sleepy Rel, and they're looking to try and take her down. No flash available. Becca secures it. Now 3-1 in favor of DRX, and this bottom side that you said needed to win, still not winning for T1.
And I'd like to cast your mind back, because Pioshik was one of the first junglers to actually pick up the Lilia. Even last year, when Lilia was just released, it actually took a while for the pro scene and people at large to catch on at how strong this champion really could be.
Yeah.
And Pioshik was one of the very few that was always happy to pick it up. Fake, you're not level 6 yet.
Yeah, he's 2 levels behind, in fact.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you die in the river, it is a pretty unfortunate situation, but still, he's looking for it. 2 levels down, finds level 6 here. And remember, Silas into Seraphine was a thing, right? Like, this was considered one of the answers because Encore is ridiculous. And so now both sides have an Encore in theory. So Solka is now in a lot more trouble because Faker, it's not just the abscond that you have to watch out for. He also now has a potential hijacked Encore, which is a bother.
The real question is, do you go moon stuff now on Faker? Because you can use the Encore, you can use it so well.
Well, the train is going to come on through here. The flash is going to have to come out, but the damage still connects. Kingen has Mega, and Pioshik is in the area. As Spear going to go wide one more time, Cuz is going to be able to take down that ward. It's replaced immediately. As, okay, Attract Repel is going to 100% deny Becca. That was it feels bad. Still, this bottom lane absolutely fine on DRX's side. And Cuz looking for this early Herald. Gonna have to pounce out of the pit though, as Pioshik says, thanks very much for the leash. As Solka's gonna move on over as well. Sidesteps very nicely. The spear.
Faker didn't level his ult.
Oh.
I was wondering why he didn't go for... I thought he was holding it, because he went for the trade aggressively on Solka, and Solka was low. And I thought that he was...
Now he has ult.
Well, yeah.
I mean, yes, now he has ult.
That's
You saw nothing. We saw nothing. You know, he's,
no, but that's a big problem. Because if Solka dies there, the entire course of the game can look differently. And I don't know 100% if he would have, but he would have definitely had to flash the Encore. And he possibly could have died. And instead...
And then also you lose control of the river, theoretically, because you can't move up as far without your flash.
And now it's
there's a flow-on effect, yeah.
And this creates a situation in which DRX are just going to be able to extend this gold lead further. This is not a comp from T1 that is going to win late. Yes, you have a front line. Cool. Yeah, you're playing into what we currently perceive as the strongest team fighting champion in the entire game. Of course, other regions have different thoughts on that, but we're within the LCK. I think we can safely say that there is no champion as strong as Seraphine. Surely Teddy will be building towards the Serpent's Fang, otherwise I don't know why the extremely early prio on the Varus to come through here, but it's not looking clean from T1. And playing this even after last game, like, sure, you can make it work somehow. I don't know how T1, but you find an angle. But if you actually fall behind,
it is definitely dangerous. Faker only behind 8 CS. As you remember, you know, you can see that he still does have a level deficit here in this mid lane after that early death, but hasn't costed him too much money. As Faker just sitting on this Encore. Might need to use it relatively soon, not entirely sure when he hijacked it. But now I'm just going to be able to pick up this farm. The wave clear on the Sylas starting to level up, as we can see. Wants to get towards that Everfrost as soon as possible. As here on the top side, bit of a battle as Canna not going to get pushed into turret range, but does have to flash the bowling ball. Cuz in the area. DRX immediately know that by the movement. The Scion had a friend, and Sylas also disappearing from the map. Going to mean that things are pretty scary if they wanted to go up for a follow-through. But as you can see, DRX ahead in every lane. It's close to a 3,000 gold lead for this squad. This game going even better than the early game of Game 1, and that was also very good.
The more I think about it, the more I like the Zyra as well, because they provide you with a lot of threat. Faker.
Yep, Becker is actually rotating in. The Encore just going to 100% miss. As Cuz looking for it one more time. Very dead is the Gnar, as Faker's just going to teleport out. Says goodbye to everyone, and now he's backing on the top side of the...
That's a heist.
Yeah,
that's a successful one, as the top side play works out.
And Canna can just, like, chill up here. There's no teleport for King to get back into this lane, and so the Scion's going to be feeling a whole lot better. He's got the Still Soul Summoners as well in the Ignite and Heal. If you don't understand that, that is that's a reference to a player from, like, Season 1. So shout-outs to those of you who have been playing for an extraordinarily long time and watched a lot of Dyrus' stream back in the day.
I don't know that reference, and I've watched a lot of League, man.
Yeah, I was realizing that was... He used to just play Vladimir and always take Heal Ignite. That was what he did every time.
Capitalization here of the lack of flash that was forced earlier. Nice drift by Kana. Sign is not traditionally you think of as good setup for mid-lane, but it works. Yeah, it gets the job done. And these kind of moments are the reason why, even though on paper this match should not be really easy for T1. I still don't think it will be easy, but I do think they still have a shot, which in of itself is crazy because, as I was trying to say earlier before...
Ow! Yeah, one more of them, he's dead.
Yeah, if he gets hit by...
Played.
Yeah, okay, well, T1 hit the spike, so maybe we're just a bit premature. Gonna try and make it work now. However, Elder's gonna come up here.
Yep. Faker actually avoiding a lot of Sulker's poke as well. Certainly works out. Canna just going to try and absorb to the best of his ability. And does so. He's going to lose the turret, but Teddy's still zoning Bao and Becker away from this one. And Faker now has a bit of a free lane. Sulker went back to base as Bao once again soaking spears. And this is actually what can turn this, right? If T1's poke actually lands, then DRX's comp isn't necessarily going to work unless Seraphine is there healing everyone all the way back up again. So maybe late game it's going to be absolutely fine. But right now, it's good.
Even then, just the heal from Rakan and the synergy that those two have, Guardian is still up. This is not an easy dive for T1. Featherstorm clans all available.
Well, there's a change of corruption as the Crashdown says goodbye to the Rakan. You said what? Did that look difficult? It just didn't look that difficult to me, I'm not going to lie. As now Faker finds a Featherstorm. He'll be able to answer Bao, but not before he kills him. Throws that one out. The feathers go a little bit further away, but he can't recall them anyway, so he doesn't even mind, as that's a big old Gnar into the wall. But you can see this. He does manage to grab the kill onto Canna, but now that's a very angry zombie that's looking for him, and Faker will pick this one up. I don't know how they do it, Chronicler, but T1, they found this mid-game skirmish. And let's see whether this can help them snowball.
They still don't have a gold lead. That's how bad the game was going. Oh, and this is a necessary play for T1 because you lose that topside turret. You've so much gold gets funneled into DRX's pockets. And I took, yeah, you cleanse and Featherstorm available. Sure.
Fade away chains of corruption, by the way.
Yeah. Becca doesn't have those things, so Becca gets locked down with a really nice play from Teddy. And then going in here, you know, if it works, it works. It's a bit aggressive. Kana knows he's gonna die at the moment that he goes for that play. Kingen is able to at the very least pick up a kill on the sign, but pays for it with his own life. So in the end, it's a 3-for-1 trade, which you're happy with as T1. Pioshik shoving out mid lane, nowhere near that play. But how to what extent actually like makes this the game easier for you as T1, and that's a rough one because yes, Faker and Teddy are getting fed, but I feel like they're now starting to build a gold lead. If they can do this 2 more times, then I'm okay. Okay, T1, you got me convinced. But
I also think that DRX, if they had the same deficit as T1, we'd be having very different conversations, right? Because this is Seraphine moving towards a late game with an 80 carry that's very self-sufficient, able to build crit.
Oh yeah.
Like, this is pretty ridiculous when it comes to scaling, and DRX already have an advantage. So you're talking about not being out of the woods. I'm saying that T1 needs to continue to push this extraordinarily hard. I absolutely agree.
They do. Just keep killing them. Get 10 kills on my man Teddy. He needs to like one-tap everyone, and so does Cuz, and so does Faker. Especially a pick like the Silas that benefits from finding the all-ins, finding the messy, extended fights, not a straight-up 5v5, but more fight one person, fight 2 more people, get an ultimate, and keep that going for as long as you can.
Oh, Becca pops! What the heck was that? Oh no, but the Encore is going to connect onto Teddy. He's going to be taken down. Solka answers very nicely, and now Kingen into position. Bowling ball blocked by a minion. Which is a little bit unfortunate there for Pioshik, but good answer as they get support for 80 carry. A little bit more important there as Teddy is massively key for T1's poke battery.
There's an angle for T1, and it's get this Drake and stack 3 Oceans. Get the Ocean. I know we don't know whether there's going to be Oceans yet. I know it's a coin flip, but that's the line.
Is it a coin flip? I mean, hi.
Yeah, come on, man.
Yeah. This is not what I want. It's just generally what happens. Is that was a beautiful Encore, and Teddy, unfortunately, going to be taken down at the end.
You see the extension also being so incredibly valuable there on the Seraphine, and one of the main reasons why this pick feels so bad to teamfight into, augmented by the amount of healing she provides with Moonstone, the shielding from her W, and all around just the utility that she provides. And T1 fought their way back from an early deficit, so that's something, I guess, but they shouldn't have been in an early deficit, and they still need to keep out-executing their opponents to a point where you just... It's hard. But they can do it. We literally just saw them do it, so it's possible. But they need to hit the big poke. They need to find the angles, or Faker needs to find the most insane all-in ever. And I've said that before. That was when Prince killed this DRX. You need to find the most insane all-in ever. And then he Samira'd them at the Baron.
He literally found exactly what you asked him to do, which is 100% the analyst's dream, is King in. Only Mininar right now, as Cuz does have the smite, so that is going to be the Infernal Drake lockdown, and as we can see, it is a Cloud Soul this game.
You had one job.
What? Obviously, if you've been watching throughout this season, my one job is Cloud Souls, okay?
Yeah, but no, that's not the job
so I did my one job.
No, that's not the job we want you to do.
Are you saying that I've been paid for the wrong thing this whole time? Because I've been trying really, really hard to get these Cloud Souls, man. Oh dear.
Have you been ignoring the feedback sessions about Cloud Souls?
I just don't check my emails that much, you know?
Come on, man.
I'm sorry. I'm too busy thinking about League of Legends.
It makes sense.
And clouds.
Yeah. Because you're soaring in the clouds.
Oh, it's so sad that it was just gonna happen, wasn't it?
I want to go in a little bit about why the Mountain Tool is so good. It basically gives you a Seraphine of your own, and it provides T1 with a way to actually have a win condition in drawn-out team fights. Because I don't think that the T1 comp with picks like the Rel, the Nidalee, and specifically the Silas really benefit from drawn-out fights where you can get multiple engages, re-engages, right, hop on and off.
Yep.
Teddy can stand in the backline, keep throwing arrows. Like these long, elongated fights in a normal situation, I think you can play really well because you have the front line, you have the tankiness. But the problem in this situation is you're playing against a Seraphine, so it feels to me like that's just not an option as...
Oh my goodness.
Damn,
Extraordinary amount of vision control here that Cuz has been able to put down. As Shirley just going to disco for a little bit. That was really cool. Are they going to be able to take it down? They do, denying the charge. And that means that that outer turret is going to remain standing. Actually, very important here for T1.
This going on the Cloud Soul, it's happening again.
Yeah, we're doing it.
Oh my!
You really have to release that album,
It was
dude.
Chaos Storm last time.
Yeah,
I think
it was
that's still
Disco and
better.
Chaos Storm. There was a bit of that actually.
There
for
was.
DRX last game.
Yeah.
Probably should have mentioned it. It's like, you know, it's free advertising.
It is for the upcoming single by
Yeah.
Atlas. We don't know what kind of music
No,
it's
you were
be
gonna
yet, but-
release it. You're the musical boy. You were in a band.
I mean, we'll have to do it together, okay? I won't feel good stealing that from you. And
I
T1,
can do an ocarina solo.
and there we go. Got it on lockdown. And
Hell yeah.
T1 kind of need to steal this game away from DRX because now we're 20 minutes in. It's dead even. I don't think you can get away with that as T1 team comp, and it's coming off the game we just saw. I'm not going to call this one until the Nexus has fallen.
No, you can't. You straight up can't.
Not allowed.
That's the thing that makes it so difficult, right? T1 just warps these sorts of situations even when the draft says no. They do just have a habit of finding the correct plays to navigate their way through. They shouldn't have to. It shouldn't be this difficult, and it shouldn't be this narrow. However, as Cuz misses a pounce, is going to still get the takedown and will get the leash from Faker to pick up the blue buff. King going to get slowed down there.
Guarantee you, King's damage at the end of the
Ow.
game is going to be great. And he's
I
going
think
to have done
Teddy
a lot.
might be up there as well.
Well, that's actually an interesting thing because it's a lot of flat damage, right? And it looks really good. And the main thing it does is provide pressure, as we see here, because it just gives you freedom to now start sieging. And that's, as you pointed out last game, what a Pokemon wants to do. You just want to throw out your skills and throw and throw and throw. I actually wouldn't mind if Teddy gets a blue buff at some point because he can also.
Oh, he
make
should
great
be.
use
He
of
should
it.
be getting them, but he's needed here to keep throwing out poke. As Cuz is going to get nailed by that bowling ball. That was actually very nicely aimed by Kyoshik. As chance of corruption going to be avoided by the grand entrance. Very nicely done by Becca. It's been tagged by a few too many of those. As it's a bit of a 4-1 situation, and Faker actually doing some decent work in the side lane here.
And Faker is actually hard to deal with because we already talked about how the Silas is a possible answer to the Seraphine.
Yep.
But it's also really good against the Gnar. Like, the early game is atrocious, so you don't want that matchup. But once you get some AP...
Yeah, in a side lane, it works.
Exactly. You love extended trades. You can actually get on top of Gnar. And a non-conditional Gnar into the wall. Yes, please. I'd
And
take that.
you've taken Conqueror, which is only going to help out with that. And with the Everfrost, I mean, you've just got so many CC options. You're exactly right.
As a 5-stack Dark Soul as well in the inventory of Faker. Cuz just picked his one up. I love it. You know, take the risk. Get the Dark Souls. You need those stacks, boys, because if you don't get the stacks, you don't blow them up. It's going to be a painful one, as we do see the Morellonomicon coming out from Cuz. Considering what they're playing against, I like it. I think a reliable source, although Nidalee is not the greatest, should still be able to get spears and then have it stick a little bit better. I still want to see that Serpent's Fang.
Yeah, me too. Hopefully that's coming next here for Teddy. Certainly a lot of different options that he can go towards, but I think that would 100% be the best one. As we're still just fighting over control of this mid lane, which inherently means fighting over control of this Cloud Drake that is going to be spawning.
Yay, Cloud Break.
Yay, Chains of Corruption missing. Getting Yellow Pete flashbacks now to when Varus first came out. It's just the most difficult ability to land.
It's not easy. You can get this one up. That's the one upside as T1. Yeah, like, it's Cloud Soul, who cares?
Yep.
We don't mind at all. Because if it's Ocean Soul, this is a do or die situation. You cannot give Ocean
100%
to a
no.
Seraphine comp if you're the Poke comp. In this case, yeah, you know, sure.
Well, Guardian going to help keep Bao safe. As T1 continuing to siege here, actually. Getting a fair bit of work done to this inner turret in the mid lane. Faker holding onto the top side as well, and you can see exactly why. I think this goes back to, and was very beautifully illustrated by the vision score show-off between these two junglers. Cuz has been in there just clearing things out exactly where it needs to be cleared out. You can see there's vision on the bottom side for DRX. T1 don't care. They've been playing a topside 4-1, and that's allowing them to consistently deny the enemy jungle and get themselves back into this game. And as you can see, it's about 1,200 the lead now as those two turrets did fall down. And once again, T1 ripping apart the map with better macro against DRX. It does really feel like the story of this series.
He's going surreal thus first. I'm so sad. I was looking forward to, obviously,
I mean,
Surrealist is an amazing item. It's really, really good. It provides you with a lot more
I wasn't going to say
threat.
anything. I just wanted to let him disappoint you for me because I don't think I needed to say anything.
Really appreciate you giving me that opportunity.
Yeah.
It's nice.
Serpent's Fang has been, I think, disabled in the LCK.
Be the case.
Prove me wrong. As the Baron, once again, going to be taking some damage here. He's taken a lot of abuse, to be perfectly honest, this series. As the train's going to come on forward. The engage from Becca comes out first now. As Canna is actually going to be able to disengage very effectively, but Carrier gets denied his all in. That's a huge encore as Becca going to go down first, but Kingen says, Canna, you can do it. I can do it too. Canna gets into the back line. Not quite able to get the work done. Double kill for Pyoshik now as this is the DRX team fighting comp. Faker now looking for his ability to get in. Does manage to land it. Kingslayer goes down as well, but he's extraordinarily low and will be taken out by Kingen. Cousin Canna now trying to do what they can. It's closer than it could have been, but Canna should be taken out. The damage threats are now gone for T1. And Solka is just a disgusting heal battery, able to keep everyone alive.
You see the value coming out there in the long fight, even though T1 gets so close, right? Faker does hit that abscond, can actually go in. He wants to look for that crucial blow, but as long as Solka stays alive in these fights, it doesn't matter what you do, you're not winning the long run. And what we're seeing here is that it's Becca, who initially has a really nice setup. Due to the ultimate from Sai, you're not actually able to capitalize on that at all. But I want to draw attention to Kingen, because the amount of damage that man finds is insane. As we see the back-to-back encores, look at this.
Just massive.
If he didn't get exhausted, I think the team fight is just over right there and then, and you get the Baron, 100%, that's DRX. Instead, we get this extended skirmish, and this is what Silas kind of wants to be. But the problem to me is, sure, this is what Silas wants to be, but Seraphine doesn't mind it whatsoever either.
Yeah, and she's flashing now, at this point of the team fight. And I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that Faker's ulti got completely sidestepped, right? And then Solka hits two people, two of the ideal people. The other two move into a position where they straight up just get gnawed into oblivion.
And we see that DRX know how to play these little skirmishes, these mechanical moments at the end very well. As Kingen goes in and stays alive no matter what. Carrier.
Yeah, still looking for more as the encore is going to come down just onto Carrier. He has a stopwatch. We'll see whether he can keep himself alive. Doesn't, of course, have his flash available, and the Rel is just going to fall down. The train comes through again as Canna tries to split up this fight, but now Cuz is in trouble. Pyoshik just toying with him in his jungle, and now DRX with 5 members look to move towards the Baron, and jungle is almost dead, right? Cuz cannot actually get back here unless he can primally surge about 100 times.
Yeah, needs to try and heal up. Fortunately, there is the threat of a Mega Nod. There is still a front line, but can Cuz get to the Baron here?
Well, it's not quite 100, so I think I may have exaggerated there. As you can see, the Baron going down to about 2.5. We could just be flipping it here as DRX still on it. And that is going to be secured by Pyoshik. T1 now moving out of the area. Carrier, he's respawned, but there's no way he's getting to any sort of fight. Intelligent for T1 to actually just disengage. And this feels close, right? You look at the top of the screen, but it's starting to feel more and more impossible for T1 against this ridiculous DRX composition.
Solka went for Mikhail's second as well. And that's something we haven't really talked about yet, but that means that what we saw last game happening with Bao needs to happen again here, which is not good. It means that T1, above all odds, needs to find a kill on a target that wants to be engaged on, because that's a free encore, that now has Mikhail's available in case any other teammates are in trouble. And DRX have now gotten to the point where, like, you see, like a 2k gold lead, it's way more. This comp is super oppressive when it can just sit, siege up. They don't even need to poke, you're just deathballing your way around the map.
Yeah, and also poke means basically nothing because Seraphine exists, right?
Yes.
And not to mention that, but I mean, Becker also has a few heals available as well.
Oh, Faker.
Now, Faker could look for a potential flank here. He's clearing out all of the vision, but no way T1 are fighting for this one. Just that Cloud Drake is not really worth it. Now 5 minutes until a potential Cloud Soul available for DRX.
Surrealist's grudged finish for Teddy here. That's a big spike. That's going to give him a lot more reliable damage. But as you say, I think that it doesn't really matter. The one upside is that T1 has really good wave clear available whenever Teddy is around, and Kana can tank decently well. Either Faker, not the greatest, but he has some side lane threat, and as we've seen, he's been able to shove out these waves consistently.
Yep.
As long as you can keep the base alive for ST1, you can fight another day. And I hate to keep coming back to this, but if I hadn't just seen last game, I would say this one is very close to over, just through the sheer
100%,
power.
yeah. I think if the nameplates were off, and you were looking at these drafts and the position in the game that they are, you'd say that there is no chance DRX lose.
Agreed.
But sometimes you just have to change how you think about the game. And T1 recently have certainly been trying to force that. Bowling ball connects onto Canna. Now T1 looking for that wraparound. DRX not going to give them their engage opportunity. And the slower DRX play this, the smarter they are, as Bao is going to be tagged by that Q. Spear just pops in! What the hell was that? What? Okay, I guess that, I mean, maybe that's how you win. That's the counter siege. Do you know what you do? You one-shot people with your spears.
It's
what?
Bao as well. He has everything up. I think no one expected that. Oh, T1 is going to win this game, and they're going to learn nothing, Atlas.
Oh, it's so scary, isn't it, right? Like, if you're going to try and reinforce that this was the comp you go for, oh, it just feels terrible, doesn't it? It's like you're a teacher and one of your students has like figured out a different way to solve a maths equation. However, that working out pattern is never going to do it in the future, and you feel like you're teaching him wrong, but you can't tell him he's wrong, right? Because he solved the equation, and then he keeps doing it again and again, and somehow, by some fluke, it just keeps working, but you know eventually it ain't going to. I just don't know when it's not going to if Cuz does stuff like this. Oh my goodness.
Look at that health bar. It's again, I said this jokingly, where I'm like, you know, if you're blowing up in one go, it doesn't matter that you have healing.
Yeah.
But then it actually happens. Okay.
Can't heal if you're dead, forehead, I guess. Like, I don't know.
The downside of this is that while we're having a lot of that is understandably.
Yeah.
While we're having a laugh at that, what does it actually do? And the answer is the tier 1 of the Baron gets neutralized, which is really nice. But also that's it. Nothing else of virtue or value rather was really gained here by T1, and it means that we are looking yet again in a situation where DRX can just chill and scale up. Now we see the Moon Stuff combination actually finished. 3 items available for Bao here. Kingin, who's been playing like a madman on the Gnar, getting closer to his next item as well. And honestly, as DRX, as long as you deathball and you don't have your people nuked out of orbit from nowhere, you should be fine. And I think that a DRX at the start of the split, and I really want to make this case, would have gone for an engage there. Because I think the problem here is they give time to T1. But DRX is a team that had confidence and then lost it. And then regaining that confidence is a hard one, but you need to. You have the hard engage, you have a Rakan, you have a Gnar, you have an Encore to kind of augment those two forms of backline dive / hard engage. If you don't go for that, we giggle, but that is actually a problem. Like, you can't let your carries get blown up like that because it takes away all your pressure on the map.
Can we have a look at the vision score here between Cuz and Kyoshi, by the way?
Yeah.
Is that a typo? No. That's insanity.
Yeah. Is this the first time we're going to see a Flame Horizon?
This is a vision score Flame Horizon.
Oh my god. The technology is finally here, Atlas.
This is ludicrous. And I mean, back in the day, Flame would be like, what does that even mean, guys?
What awards? I don't need those. I'll play 1v2 as the way.
Yeah, but it is pretty impressive. And as you can see, the map is extraordinarily dark for a DRX that have a gold lead, right? As Bao almost dies again. Every time these spears come through, man,
Yeah.
it's like, well, someone could die. That melee minion, he's fine. Don't worry, he can tank one. As T1, look at how dark this is. They've started the Baron already. I mean, it's not the fastest of Barons necessarily. As Teddy does finally get on over. But yeah, like, how do you even get here?
But
yes,
it might trade for Soul.
Well, let's see whether Canna can actually stop them from getting on in. This Baron is just dead. And now they have to try and get out of the area. The sleep comes through. There's the grand entrance as Canna tries to help him. Another spear going to find a victim as the Scion's taken down. Faker also dies very early, and now Teddy is by himself. He'll be taken out, and now T1 need to try and save the Barons. This is going to be Cloud Soul, but as someone with a fair bit of Cloud Soul experience, it's not exactly the highest of value for winning these games. But still, T1, they steal a Baron, they lose 3, and now DRX are looking to try and push this one down. Cuz's spears are terrifying, but if they avoid them, things should be all right.
Pick up this free turret, then move towards the Drake. I would rather they don't try and push it. Are they trying to look for an enter just for the inhibitor? Inhibitor would make sense, hopefully not greeding beyond that, as you should be able to pick up both. Now however, a possible teleport angle is available for T1. I like the inhibitor, but it's the mid lane inhibitor which is the least relevant. As Kana is on zoning duty, you give him up every single time.
Did it? It did. It connected onto Faker.
And that's why he dies.
That's actually pretty ridiculous.
And then we get the follow-up, the chain CC, Cuz gets a very nice last little play as Teddy might be fine here, not with Pioshik also jumping over the wall, unfortunately for him.
Pioshik played that absolutely immaculately.
Yeah, it was really, really good. And this is coming from a player who's been super inconsistent throughout the second half of the split. First half, not nearly the case. Clouds are now available for DRX, and I think...
Oh my goodness, it happened.
Huh?
It's in the game.
Yeah.
I thought it wasn't on the Korean client, but it's there.
Serpent's Fang?
Yes!
In our games?
What?
Oh my god.
I could have sworn. Well, Teddy's got it now. Let's see whether it's going to be the difference maker. He, of course, still needs to be able to land his abilities, but it's going to be very, very helpful.
I thought you were doing a bit about Cloud Soul. You were being like ironic about how the technology is there, Cloud Soul's there. We've not seen that before.
Oh no, don't worry. I've got a bit of experience on that one.
I mean, that's why I thought it was a joke. And as T1, the possibility of an out execute is still there, but his Baron buff is not going to do anything for you. It's a minus 800 gold Baron power play. You've lost the Drake. And I think your only angle now is hold on for dear life and then get Elder and win the game.
Yeah, I mean, we are getting to that point 36 minutes into the game where if you just miraculously win a team fight, the game is yours, right? And miracles have been happening, right? Bao gets hit by 2 skill shots and dies. That gets more and more impactful as the game goes on.
What if T1 was DRX all along and they need the miracle win now?
Oh my goodness. I don't even know. Faker's split pushing very nicely though, as you can see. He doesn't even have a Baron, but it is just a little bit too scary here as that's kind of getting snared up. Now Kingen looking for a little bit, but that tower already falls and Sulker is getting chunked down. Faker, Kingslayering on top of Kingen here as the quickness is stolen away. He gets gnawed into the wall. Faker can still go golden, but he just doesn't. Oh no. Caught in the side lane, does manage to get the turret, but now T1 lose all of their pressure. And DRX looking to try and close this one in as I believe another spear just landed there as Kingen Strybreakering his way through. The train is going to get Canna out of this one as Cuz great sidestep on the bowling ball. Anyone just trying to disengage as best they can. Thankfully, tank does exist. And Canna will be able to get out with that one. T1 actually kiting back quite nicely here with all their spears and arrows. But they go all the way back as somehow that spear missed.
And I was a little bit worried for a second there. If Becca goes in and actually finds someone, then you can just end the game outright. Instead, Faker will be up in about 14 seconds. A teleport flank isn't really available here.
When these piercing arrows hit, man, like this is where it's dangerous. And Kingen says no, Teddy! Immediately, QSS Flash to get himself out. The Encore is good, but Canna is tanking everything. Still, it is going to most likely be the end of his life. No, he gets himself the shield and just takes the train to safety. Turret not going to be so lucky, though, as the second inhibitor turret falls. And when it comes to just ridiculous late-game drafts, I don't know how, but it's just so difficult for DRX, regardless of the fact that it looks like they have such a draft advantage.
It's not even T1's final form. Imagine if they do have a late game draft. It's what everyone has got to be.
It's too scary.
What everyone has got to be asking themselves here, as it's Kingen yet again, who's just been such an amazing force of consistency for DRX throughout the entirety of the split. Faker tries to go for a quickness play because if you can get the taunt on Kingen, then you can at least get out of there. But instead,
Ivo was too strong.
not working out. Cleanse forced there, or the kills rather, which is fine, but the fact that both Teddy and Kana stay alive through this is insane. However, Flash is now gone, and that's actually a really big one, because no Flash on Varus means that any of those Encores being aimed correctly now, with the amount of engage and frontline you have, should definitely be a possibility. It still feels like T1 holding on by a thread. It's just that this comes after game 1, so everything that I say feels warped, because it was not as bad as this one, I personally argue. I think last game was a lot more redeemable, where you did have something like the Victor. Instead, here you have an actual monstrosity in the form of Seraphine on the other end that is just a full-on raid boss. There are a lot of Rabadons being finished now here, though, and T1, they're not giving up. There's no inhibitors down. They can contest this Baron.
Yeah, Cuz does insane damage. It's okay. That is the cleanse having to be used, or the QSS, sorry. Onto Teddy as King and only finds one with the ultimate, and now you've got Kana finding that backline. Teddy pretty much zoned away from this one, though. It's Bao just fighting this one front to back, and Kingen is deciding on his way of taking this victory. Solka gonna have to walk on back as Teddy finds a few autos, a few piercing arrows. But as you can see, DRX take control of the area. They take their pick, and they get all of the heals as well.
Look at those health, boss Atlas. You might think it as a cloud or an ocean soul rather in this game. Absolutely not. There's just Seraphine coming to full force. Not ultimate available for Faker. This needs to be a hero play that I've ever seen. Otherwise, you're not going to make it here.
I've seen this from Faker before. We've all seen this from Faker before, but this is in a 4v5 with this level of compositional gap. And that is going to be the Baron secured for DRX. And they are moving towards an actually notable gold advantage, but only at 41 minutes into this one. 10 seconds on the Elder.
That's game. If you get Elder, that's just it. There's no way you get away from that. Never, ever, ever. Kana doesn't have teleport available. DRX can maybe rush this.
Well, they're looking for it. Kana can turn into a train and try and get himself here, but then he won't have that ultimate for the ensuing fight. T1 need to desperately find some way of buying time. Kingen looking to deny. The Chains of Corruption do connect, and now the train is drifting forward, but misses, actually crashes a little bit too early there. But T1 do have control of this area. Can they steal away the Elder Drake? It just goes down to Bao. Picks up the double. Faker's already dead. Becker steals the last one. DRX will win game 2. And I thought this was a pretty comfy way to get a 3-0 for T1. But DRX have done it. They found the draft. They found the final team fight. And despite it not necessarily looking convincing, in the end it will be DRX tying up the series.
And in game number 1 you get away with it, Atlas. In game number 2 you get appropriately punished.
Absolutely.
Seraphine makes it through the draft, and DRX show why this team is in the playoffs in the first place. Yes, we did not see this DRX for the second round. Sure thing. But when it comes to playoffs, the only thing that matters is how you're playing right now. And right now, it's 1-1.
Yeah, it absolutely is. DRX, I think that, you know, many of the comments after this will be about what the heck was the draft, what were we doing. I'm really glad, to be perfectly honest, that T1 were punished this time around, because their drafting even in game number 1 shouldn't have led them to an on-paper victory, right? However, they're just really good players. This kind of got close, but sometimes draft diff does win out in the end.
I think in game 1 it's at least excusable, because while you are somewhat limited to your draft and you're still relying on outplays, I still would argue that that composition can go to late game and be like, okay, we can still reliably win.
Yeah.
However, for this composition, it wasn't reliably winning. It was literally just T1 holding on way past the power point for their composition. Sure, you find a kill on Bao, but it doesn't matter. And I am just in awe of how well DRX have shown up here today, because as you said, I was expecting a 3-0, and I think a lot of people were, because T1 has looked so good over the course of the split, but as a whole, to me, King and man, these Nas, you know,
yeah,
they've been making it work, because he single-handedly keeps everyone away. And Bao, this is a dream scenario for Razaya at this point in the game, where you can just kite back. You still have cleanse.
Yep, he gets knocked out by Kana, but it absolutely does not matter. And this is one of those comps, right, that keeps their AD carry alive extraordinarily well. Yes, Faker got the Silas, managed to find backlines, things like that, but Seraphine is ridiculous, and late game, of course, the Xayah just does a fair bit of work, but look at that nod damage. Damn, that's pretty ridiculous. 29k as well for Pyosik, who I think also had a pretty amazing time on the Rift this time around as well. He was 5-0-11 by the end of that one. The Lilia was finding these incredible bowling balls to start off, set the scene for some of these fights. And I agree with you, I think that Kingin was fantastic, but I think huge hats off to Pyosik as well, who is standing up to the pressure and succeeding.
It's both. And this goes back to what we were saying in the first game. Kingin and Pyosik, top jungle duo, this one before. But when they both show up in this form, it's just insane. And I think we might go to 5 games yet again, because if this keeps happening, I don't know, man.
Yep, I'm very much looking forward to what the draft is going to hold for us as we move to game number 3, but I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Let's go to a short break. When we get back, the analyst desk, and then that game 3.
얘들 못 나와. 나 이렇게 했으면.
나루공이다.
이거 근데 쌈 봐야 될 것 같긴 해. 앞으로 원래 앞으로 바로스 노플. 뒤. 니달리 플래시. 니달리 죽여. 잘 잡았어. 오케이.
야, 미드 탑.
끝났어. 이거 살려줘.
미안하다.
브라보.
아 잘했다 우리 팀.
아 이거
DRX evens out the series with this game number 2 victory up against T1. So what's your take on the draft, guys? I think they started off with a huge lead up against T1. T1 this time around, they were not able to find the main theme of their comp. Rather, they just tried to counterpick the blind picks coming out from DRX. In game number 1, DRX played Poke comp, and game number 2, DRX went around Seraphine. They wanted to play a teamfight comp. They had a very strong teamfight ability. So DRX always had a set theme for their comp in both games, whereas T1, they were not able to find their own concept for this game, and I think Xayah and Rakan was the centerpiece for their comp in game number 2 for DRX. Varus is really strong in lane, and he has a massive poke damage. And Sylas was a really smart pick in order to counter both Seraphine and Gnar. However, looking at the first rotation of T1's pick, they do not have a strong initiation, so they were forced to take some of the teamfight opening champions for the second rotation for their pick and ban. So DRX played the teamfight better, but at the same time, DRX had the better comp and better draft strategy. In addition to that, Poke Varus is really good when you can always have lane priority without calling the help of your own jungler. But today, T1, even though Varus was able to have a very strong lane, well, the top side of the map was losing quite a lot. So T1, if they were having their best performance today, well, there were some mistakes where they were not able to go flawless. And this time around, we had a lot of back and forth fights and games today. And every time we were able to see DRX coming out with an edge with their draft, and then this time around, they even took the game number 2 with their teamfight strength. Now let's take a look at this first highlight where TRX, their bottom duo, was able to put up a really nice fight. So Rakan sneaks in for a flank angle, and then he gets spotted by Varus. So instead of just backing, he doesn't hesitate and he instantly goes in, and then Rel goes in for a re-engage, but she actually fails the crash down combo, which means T1 had no more initiation tool. Together with Rel and Sylas, I think they were looking for that Rel and stolen encore combo, but because of that mistake, Faker also lost his agencies to go in and open fight. However, still there was a chains of corruption onto Xayah, so she takes up so much damage, and she even uses her Gale Force forward to clean up a kill on Sylas, but she ended up walking in to the Kingslayer range and became a potion for him. But still, the rest of the DRX players were winning the fight really well, so they were able to clean up those kills. So both teams were looking for some setup play over there, so it was a very close fight. But still, at the end of the fight, we could tell that DRX was always winning this trade because they had the better comp. They drafted better. The beginning of the team fight was not the best one for DRX, but still, they were able to win because they had a really nice comp in order to take fights. Now let's take a look at the second highlight where Lilia was going a full strike mode with her bowling skills. Let's take a look. T1 started a very sneaky Baron, so DRX was super late to recognize it, and then Sewer Seed actually hits the wall, and the procs is also on Faker. So Sion and Sylas falls asleep, and then because of the CC chain, Sylas was not able to do anything but get 100 to 0. So because of their mid laner was like getting popped immediately as the fight got started, there was no way for T1 to win that fight. But still, at the same time, that was not the best position for T1 with their poke Varus to take. If Varus had the attack speed instead, maybe they would have been a lot more faster finishing that Baron as well. So I think T1 definitely showed their edge over DRX in terms of the macro decisions, but DRX always had this confidence to pull off team fight better than the opponents, and they always had better comp compared to T1. Now let's check out the player of the game on the side of TRX. Kingen will win the POG with that Gnar performance. I think Gnar has been having a really great day overall today. You know, there are some best of fives where one specific champion stands out. I think today maybe it's gonna be day of Gnar. Regardless of the champion matchup, Gnar has been having a fantastic time in today's series. You know, in game number 1, Gnar got counterpicked by Jace, but still, Gnar was actually ending the game victoriously. And a fantastic sidestep away from the quickness that was stolen by Faker. And Gnar can just dominate the team fight every time. And looking at the opponent's comp, Gnar didn't have any kind of threats to die here, so he was able to just go in whenever he wanted to and then cleaned up the kills. And then we have sustainability coming out for DRX in order to always win the team fight, especially in the later phase. And Kingen picked up 8 votes out of 9 in order to win that POG. And we are heading into game number 3 with a very even score between T1 and DRX, and the winner for game 3 will be having the match points. So let's check out who is gonna come out on top and get the lead of the series.
Thank you so much, Jisun, as usual, for the Analyst Desk translation. And we are back here for playoffs, and yes, it's all tied up. It's a best of 3 now between T1 and DRX. And I think what we're hoping for is a little bit of a change in the drafting strategy here for T1 especially. And I just want more of the same from DRX. I think that they've been really outperforming their round 2 demonstration earlier.
It's just a rough 2 games for T1, even though they won the first one. And I think the first one, as I said, I think is excusable. Yes, you need great execution to actually win that game, and you do give over a lot of power to DRX, but I see the point behind that comp, right? I think it's very cohesive, it knows what it wants to do, and it does that well. Sure, it's a risk that you take, but I'm okay with that. However, this second comp had multiple issues. One, leaving Seraphine open, that's just, no, don't ever do that again, please. You already showed you can deal with the Hecarim, right? Yeah. You banned Hecarim instead, don't do that. Just ban the Seraphine. It is too strong. It is just absurdly warping and powerful in of itself, let alone when you're playing a poke composition. Because if you don't 100-0 them, your poke does nothing, which we saw time and time again in the game. And that means that going into this third game, I want to see a cohesive draft from T1, and if you're not going to play to your early game strengths, because again, this is a team that was like almost leading in every single pre-15-minute stat, which we've not seen thus far, sure, but then actually commit to it. If your early game is not good today, it happens. Then adjust in draft. I want to see late game scaling, team fighting, without completely giving over prio, and please don't let Seraphine get through draft again. I want to not know in advance who wins the game.
Indeed. Well, Silas is going to be the first ban here, so T1 hoping that Seraphine does get through the draft, because of course they would like to pick that one up without her encore being available to be stolen away. Senna is going to be the ban here, and I 100% believe that is going to be Senna, Seraphine, and either Thresh or Hecarim to be banned away here by DRX.
I'd imagine Seraphine and Thresh to be the bans here. I think that the Hecarim we've seen, you can actually get away with, you can deal with. Yes, he's incredibly strong, but he's not quite as insane as he was on 11.5, and even though it is an insanely strong jungler, I don't feel like he just auto-wins you the game the way that we have seen the Seraphine do. There's the ban, meaning that it's probably going to be the Thresh third here, sticking with that trio. But T1, the Zoe here is an interesting angle. That are they also going to like bend the chase and just go for a first pick Gnar?
Yeah, it's interesting. Renekton, of course, going to be banned away here. I don't know whether you necessarily need to ban Jace. We've seen that matchup actually, weirdly enough, not go that badly. We saw it yesterday, in fact. But, you know, maybe nameplates did play a part in that. As T1's still thinking that picking away the Udyr is a better idea than just allowing that Hecarim to go through, as there is the Gnar, and Pyosik should be locking in the Hecarim here as well. So 2 fantastic teamfight tools already for DRX.
And the fresh bans consistently mean that answers that you normally go for, like a fresh Aphelios, would be insane here, right? But you can't do that. You're not allowed to. And Aphelios Kench doesn't quite have the same ring to it, and that's why we've seen T1 instead opt for just super standard good blind pick lanes in the past. Now you can go for a counter pick in this scenario if you want to go for a Camille or the Aurelia.
I love it.
And, you know, if you want to punish, this is the way to go.
Let's see where Faker's going to go with his pick, because I think locking away a better lane for, or a better option for Teddy could be a good one too. But
Tristana is open, made its way through the draft.
Was banned second by T1 in both games prior to this. So could potentially be a great choice here. Of course, Buster Shot, brilliant into the Gnar, and works into Hecarim as well as Faker's Twisted Fate. This is T1 actually, like, I kind of like it, because last game, if they had have played into a 1-3-1, that's actually a pretty good way of dissecting DRX, because their strength has been miracle team fights. What if you just don't team fight? That's a theory that you could look for.
I agree. I think that it is, at least this is an angle with a clear, very clear identity. Love the Varus ban, because Varus is one of the best AD carries to just be parked in the mid lane and clear waves indefinitely, which you don't want as DRX, even though into that much hard engage and Wombo, it's not amazing without peel. But if they pick up like Varus Kench, it's like, that's feeling wrong. I wouldn't even mind a blind Tom Kench ban here, because I think what you're going to do as DRX, you're just going to go for the same kind of strategy. Just run them down, all in, and this teamfight composition already never going to be matched by T1. However, as you say, I think pulling apart that death ball is a smart call, because the one thing that DRX have been lacking in throughout the entire day, even in the last game, is their macro. Their macro, not on point, not to the level of T1. Of course, the downside of this is T1, if you fall behind with these side lanes, which should never ever happen, but if it does happen, you are so dead. But so that was the same last game, right? And then it took a little bit longer, but it was still the same. And if T1 is going to keep going with the idea of we need to win this early, we need to stomp them, and we're not going to take the risk for team fights.
Sejuani. Very interesting.
What?
Just going to be taking that one away. Bao thinking about a Samira. Tristana available, and still the Samira going to be looked at as the option.
I'm so confused. This is like a hidden R5 counter pick for Becca? I'm not... What else would it be?
I'm not entirely sure. However, the Alistair is going to be locked away. Leona's still there for Keria if they do want to go for that. And there's the Tristana that we were talking about. I think Tristana and Leona certainly a pretty good option here, as Trist, pretty good wave clearer herself with the explosive charge.
Oh,
this would be safety, and this would be also very self-sufficient when T1 are going for their dive plays.
So this on Leona also provides you an actual reliable threat in lane, which I quite like, because that level 6 spike is actually quite significant if you can hit it early. And in a 1-3-1 comp, an AD carry like Ezreal just feels the best, doesn't it? Especially into the enemy team, you see all these hard engage divers. This
more dive!
Oh my god, okay, this I love so much, because what we see here, it won't only augment the global pressure and the side lane pressure that you already have with the Twisted Fate and with the Aurelia, but it also is really good into champions that want hard engage on top of you. DRX is going for the same style. Sure, you give over to Tristana, which I think in a vacuum is a stronger AD carry, but at the very least T1 has gone back to a draft where it's a clear, cohesive plan. You're going to 1-3-1, you have a self-sufficient AD carry, Teddy can literally just be left alone in that lane, Carrier can roam, your side lane pressure is going to be absurd, and you snowball and win through that. So at least, unlike game number 1 where the sign pick just didn't really do anything ever, it's cohesive. However, DRX can always win the game. Just need one good fight.
Oh yeah, and if this gets to a point where we're fighting over Barons and there's Elders on the table, right? If this gets to that ultra late game, DRX should still be able to manipulate the map, despite the fact that their macro hasn't been the best, into the point where T1 has to fight them. Because park yourself at a Baron and then a 5v5 is almost inevitable, right?
You need early Drakes as T1 to time what you're saying. If you don't get the early Drakes, it's just over, because what we've seen really throughout the last split is that, or really the whole year, is that due to the power and importance of Drakes, you cannot just split push. You need to actually get the early objectives, because otherwise the enemy team is going to go, well, good luck split pushing. You'll get a top lane inhibitor and we'll get Mountain Soul. Guess who wins? Haha.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, it's not Mountain Soul, it's definitely not Cloud Soul, which is generally what happens here in the LCK, unfortunately. And it's again early pressure for T1 and the all-in wombo combo composition that dreams are made of for DRX.
No, 100%. I'm actually, like, this is definitely one of the more interesting drafts that we've had so far today. I think a lot of people have been a little bit frustrated by T1, and I think you still can be, right?
You're allowed
I think
to be.
Teamfight is still definitely a much more simple way of winning the game. This is going to take a lot of finesse, but that's what T1 have demonstrated they know how to do, right? Their last draft just wasn't very good.
No.
No. I could put it lightly, but I'm not going to.
No, I agree. I think that another shift that we see here is the acknowledgement that Kana's really on form today. I think last game he was rather forgettable on the Sion, but the comp also didn't allow him to do anything.
It was like R5 Sion into Nah. It's just absolutely not what you want.
Not just that, but he was just there wasn't really, I think, a situation in which he can hard carry that game with the amount of setup that he had. He has an AD carry that just wants to poke, that doesn't actually want to follow up on his engages, right? Because Teddy still needs to respect, etc.
Yep.
But if you look at that first game, Kana was the win condition. And in Irelia into a Nah, we've seen literal back-to-back solo kills in this matchup. Keen showed us how easy he can make it look. And with Kana on the form that he is right now, I think this is a gamble you take as T1, but it's one that can work out. And if there is one pick in the current meta that excels at making sure that you turn early priority into early objectives, it is the Udyr, because it's 4-0.
Not actually giving away the ward position there on the bottom side, as you saw. Becca was able to get it in there, but quite able to get too much more done. As we have a look at the win rates, not exactly quite as impressive as T1's. 0-3 on the Tristana is definitely not what you want to see, unless you're a T1 fan, in which case you're going to be pretty psyched about it. Now Kana still wanting to fight, does manage to get that Ionian further stacked up. As he goes through his potion, and Kingan's going to give him the good old thumbs up. He was impressed.
Or is it just a mental fight he's trying to win?
I think it's definitely.
I would argue that with nice spacing coming out from King there. Teddy and Carrier having the pressure, which is interesting. Of course, the level 1 isn't great. It's Kana.
Yeah. As soon as you're able to land that, you're feeling a whole lot better as Kingan's realizing just how difficult this can be. Pioshik going to helicopter rampage that last one as Kana. Yeah, hit by a turret, definitely not going to help you in this matchup, especially as Kingan is about to hit Mega.
No, that's not good. You need pressure in the lane. That's basically what you pick it for. Can still poke a little bit, has one more cookie that he has now used. And we also saw Pioshik going for the E there, meaning that he might be looking for an early play on both sides. Generally, I think if you're decently sure.
Okay, Kana. I'm not sure he's going to be able to do this, and that is just a solo kill for Kingan on the top side, but almost feels a little bit more like a solo death.
I need a moment of silence for that one, because that is the worst game. I just give credit to Kana for how well he's been playing in that game number 1. This is not a matchup you can afford to lose. You need to win this top lane 100%. If you don't have side lane pressure, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Won't work.
It kind of takes another turret shot as Kuz just holds on to these caster minions. I mean, the matchup dictates that this should still be okay, but Kingan now with that extra kill to help augment. Now wanting to deal with this minion wave, and Kuz, there's just no way you can really help out. They're of course not going to be diving. Kana has to go home yet again.
Found the cancel.